It's coming right now.
Okay,
There it is.
there we go. All right. Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 144th Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We're starting off with 53 people and the great Medea Benjamin, along with Dennis Bondar. Our first hour today, we are going to focus on Ukraine and on the reactors at Zaporizhzhia and the request to get the United Nations in there to take them over, for God's sakes. Not since the Suez crisis in 1956 has the UN sent in a protective force, but in this case, we really need it. Obviously, so the first hour is going to be taken up with Ukraine. We're going to hear from Karl Grossman as well as Rebekah on both the political situation in Ukraine and on the nuclear crisis. In the second hour, we'll be joined by Josh Fox, the great activist filmmaker, and we're also going to deal with some gerrymandering issues. Actually, a couple of court decisions in New York and Alabama, of all places, that have gone in our favor in terms of democracy and putting an end to gerrymandering. That will be in the second hour. But we're going to start with the great Medea Benjamin, one of the true vanguard activists. If ever my daughter's had a role model, it would be Medea Benjamin. She is just ferocious and nonstop, has a book out now about Ukraine. We'll hear her speak on Ukraine, and then joined by Dennis Bondar to tell us about the horrific and terrifying situation with the nuclear reactors in Ukraine. And then we're going to open it up. We'll do the full hour. After all, this is a war, and probably in the history of the world, it is as dangerous a war as we've ever had because of the presence of these 6 nuclear plants. I also read somewhere someone is claiming that there was a breach in the security at the storage facility for Russia's nuclear weapons. So we will talk about all that, but we want to start with Medea. Medea, you're welcome to post in the chat the link to your book. Tell us about your book and tell us what you want to say from Code Pink and from your great history as a peace activist, what your feelings are and your take is on the war in Ukraine.
Well, I
Somebody
know.
needs to mute. Go ahead, Medea.
Thank you for inviting me on, and I know people are in this call, as well as around the world, are so concerned about the climate issue as we are dealing with the record heat. People are starting to understand how this is an existential threat to the planet. The same is true of Ukraine, and unfortunately, there's not enough people who understand that existential threat when you have what has become very much a proxy war between the US and Russia that have 95% of the world's nuclear weapons. People should be really up in arms about this continued war and be doing everything they can to figure out ways to get all the parties to the negotiating table. I just got back from Ukraine. I wrote this book about a year ago. It's called War in Ukraine, Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict. And while I'm talking, maybe somebody could put the link in. But I went to Ukraine recently just to try to get a sense, a year and a half into this war, what people there were thinking. And unfortunately, I found most of the people I talked to thinking that a victory was possible in terms of Ukraine getting back every inch that Russia had taken of the Donbass and Crimea. And my sense from both everything that I read on what's happening on the ground, as well as what has clearly become lack of progress in Ukraine's counteroffensive, as well as documents that were leaked from the Pentagon a few months back, show that this is really a stalemate, that all that's happening now is a lot of soldiers getting killed, a lot of civilians being killed, a lot of continued death and misery. And so when I talk to people in Ukraine about how they think this war is going to end, on the one hand, they are fed a steady diet in the Ukrainian media and from their leaders that they are going to be able to take back 100% and achieve a real victory. When I said that, you know, I would respond and say, do you think Russia is really going to allow Ukraine to take back Crimea? Privately, people would say no, but we can't talk about that publicly. And so there you have on one side the idea that a victory is possible. And of course, you have that on the Russian side as well, that they believe they are much more capable militarily than the Ukrainians, no matter what weapons NATO puts into the mix. And they have, of course, the ultimate weapon, which is a tactical nuclear weapon, which they have actually threatened to use. So my great misgiving is not only all the weapons that NATO is throwing into this, and we can talk about the latest horrific decision on the part of the Biden administration to send in cluster munitions, despite a global ban that 123 nations have signed, despite the fact that depleted uranium is being sent in with armor that the British are sending in, that not just all of these weapons that NATO is putting into this mix, but that the United States, particularly the Biden administration, has not done anything to push for negotiations, has not done anything to talk directly to Putin or to Lavrov, and has not done anything to push Zelensky towards negotiations. Now, you might say, well, it's the Russians that really need to be pushed. And of course they do. And I think that's why many of us were excited about the Chinese coming in with their peace proposal, because they do have so much leverage with the Russians. But so far, the US and NATO have done nothing to push for negotiations, have continued this myth that Ukrainians can have complete victory. And it's just taking us deeper and deeper into a war that could easily turn into a third world war and could easily turn into a nuclear conflagration. So I think it's our job to join with coalitions like the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, like the International Group of Progressive Democrats of America, like the organization I represent, which is Code Pink, and find ways that we can be educating and mobilizing more people. I do want to say at a positive note that while it's been very difficult to bust through the mainstream media narrative and the narrative we get from the vast majority of people in Congress, as well as from the White House, that is changing. It's changing as the war drags on and public opinion shows that more and more Americans want to see a negotiated settlement. It's changing as there are more Republicans, not just those on the extreme right, who are putting forward initiatives to stop the flow of weapons and instead support negotiations. And it's opening up because there are presidential candidates from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, people running like Cornel West for the Green Party, and very soon probably more libertarians running for president, who are taking a position that we have to find a way to end this war at the negotiating table. And this is a very popular position. It's reaching millions of Americans, and I think it's giving us the space that we need to do more organizing. So that's the basics that I wanted to put out, and I'm open for whatever discussion you'd like to have.
Medea, it's really great to hear from you. You're so articulate and powerful. I wanted to make sure that this is a two-pronged discussion. If you don't mind, I want to, before we have response to your particular talk, I wanted to add in Dennis Bondar. Last week, we began discussing with Howie Hawkins, who's on the call from the Green Party, the movement to get the United Nations to send a peacekeeping force to the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. So Dennis, if you will follow Medea, and then we'll go to Karl Grossman and Tatanka Bricka and have a general discussion. Thank you for that, Medea. If you can post in the chat, or Steve, if you can post in the chat the link and the title for Medea's book, that would be great. Dennis Bondar, you're talking to us from New Orleans, and you've been working to get the UN to send a peacekeeping force into Zaporizhia. Can you tell us about your efforts, please?
Thank you, Howie, for this invitation. So I would like to maybe begin a little bit by saying, kind of as a response to Medea's comments, that this war, I'm originally myself from Ukraine, and my parents and friends still live there. And this war actually a lot reminds me of what my grandparents told me about the World War II. There's a lot of similarity. And in fact, this war is the absolutely existential war for Ukrainian people. And I would like to bring to your attention this publication that was put forth by Russian political scientists or political technologists, rather, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Okay, but Dennis, let's focus for the time being on the nuclear aspect, and then we'll get into the politics of the war, if we would.
Okay, sure. Let's do that.
Please go ahead and tell us what's going on at Zaporizhia.
Yeah. So I have to say, first of all, I would like to right away spotlight this beautiful and very informative article posted on the blog of Union of Concerned Scientists by Ed Liman in July 7 about the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And in particular, Liman criticizes here the international agencies for actually downplaying the risk of the current situation in the plant. So the risks are actually very high. There's plenty of scenarios from mild to absolutely catastrophic. And Chernobyl-like scenario or Fukushima-like scenario are not yet ruled out, cannot be ruled out. And this has to be important. Moreover, Ed Liman actually draws our attention to the fact that currently the power plant is operating in the regime where no power plant on Earth has been actually, nuclear power plant was actually in operation, meaning that all 6 reactors are in long-term cold or hot shutdown with fuel still inside the reactors. This has never been done before. So in fact, this is a very dangerous, literally this reactor is operating in the regime where nobody knows what's going to happen. And the scenario for Fukushima and Chernobyl-like disaster still cannot be ruled out. So this is very important to realize. Earlier in October, myself, with Zahar Popovich and MV Ramana, we have actually reached out to the trade union of Ukrainian nuclear workers, whose members are still at the plant, and actually engineers that run the plant. And we actually conducted an interview. So it's a little bit out of date, October 7, and a very stark picture about the conditions of nuclear workers emerged. That the people are, it's horrible conditions. They're under constant harassment by FSB and other Russian security. There is people feel unsafe. The nuclear power plant, there's an Energodar city where the nuclear power plant workers live. The living conditions are disastrous. The humanitarian aid cannot be reached because Russians are actively blocking it. All this very difficult situation, it's very important to realize that these workers operate a very highly, of course, dangerous facility. And the fact that they are living in such a distressed situation is not a welcome development. In fact, according to International Atomic Agency, the main factor to tackle any possible accident is actually the staff has to be on place and in a good state of mind. So this is, the living conditions cannot be factorized out from the discussion about the plant. It's an integral part. Unfortunately, I reached out to them again recently, and the situation did not improve. It got even worse. Actually, it got even worse. The Russian management is Russian occupation forces trying to impose, trying to force the upper management of the plant actually to sign the contract with Rosatom. It's a Russian nuclear agency. Whereas the majority of the engineers still actually refuse to sign the contract with Rosatom. This harassment still continues, and the situation, the living conditions are still very, very bad. Unfortunately, I have to say that the nuclear plant workers, engineers, they feel betrayed by the international community. They feel that the role of International Atomic Agency has been actually rather negative, actually, not a constructive. It's basically de facto serves to legitimize the presence of the Russian forces. And the only solution actually to the security of this facility is to Russian forces to actually withdraw. That's the only solution. And in fact, the trade union Atomprofspilka, that's the name of the trade union. They feel, you can hear the pain, how they feel abandoned by the international community. Now,
the international community.
So, international agencies, yes.
Yeah, the International Atomic Energy Agency, unfortunately, also promotes nuclear power.
Yes.
And you are right. We have been seeing spokespeople from the nuclear industry downplaying the danger here. Let me very quickly, if I can, we have the 6 reactors there. This is the biggest nuclear plant in Europe because it has 6 reactors. Every one of them is capable of a Chernobyl or a Fukushima. They are in various states of shutdown. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis. They're in various states of shutdown, from cold to, I guess, hot. But all the 6 fuel pools are vulnerable because they need constant cooling, and the fuel supplies are dubious, and it's an extremely unstable situation. And God forbid, should the fuel pools lose cooling, we would have the idea that the reactors being in shutdown becomes irrelevant because of the gargantuan quantities of radiation that would come out of the fuel pools. Is that correct, Dennis?
I mean, it's true. There are plenty of scenarios. Yes, 5 reactors are in cold shutdown and 1 in hot shutdown to produce steam, which is necessary for plant maintenance. Yes, of course, the AE and the other agencies, they actually say, oh, the design of the reactors are not Chernobyl-like, so therefore the Chernobyl-like accident cannot happen. But this is just not, Fukushima was not Chernobyl-like design, but still, the amount of radiation released at Fukushima disaster was comparable to Chernobyl's. Of course, the vast majority of it went into the ocean. That's the difference.
Right. It came to California too. Now, you said that you feel the only solution is a Russian withdrawal, but wouldn't the arrival of security forces from the United Nations mitigate the situation?
Yeah, so let me continue. So here I show on the screen the report from International Labour Organization corroborating the conversation that I have had with the union members on the state of very horrible state affairs for workers there. So now, I would like to draw your attention to this interesting fact that the head of the Department of Nuclear Energy at International Atomic Agency is actually former Rosatom senior manager. I mean, this is his name is Mikhail Chudakov, and this is the snapshot from the webpage. I mean, is it not clear evidence of some kind of conflict of interest, to put it very mildly? I mean, this is unacceptable, right? And Rosatom is trying to claim the ownership of this plant and operational ownership. So this is explains the dysfunction of EAE, right? Handling this crisis, very serious crisis.
Okay, very good. Medea, did you want to? Dennis, thank you so much for that.
Just to my slides, that Taras Belus, an activist from Ukraine, quite a finished left activist, make a proposal, and I would like you to read his article and comments about his proposals, how UN can play a very prominent role. And based on that, Ukrainian Socialist Solidarity Network made a meeting where I was a part of it and Taras was part of it. And we had drafted a petition to actually, we're calling for actually creating a demilitarized zone around the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And we would like to follow a model of the Suez Channel crisis, where actually Britain invaded Egypt, and in order to circumvent the General Security Council, the Security Council, the General UN Assembly voted to introduce peacekeeping force in the Suez Channel, and it was approved, and it was sent there. So we would like to we proposed petition exactly following this path, and this is right now absolutely working solution. I think this is a immediate measure which can be effective to create a DMZ zone, DMZ around the plan, following the well-established international precedent. We have translated this petition to many languages, as you can see. Here. Please, distribute. Please consider signing it. We are, we need your support right now, and if this is successful, this will be great, because this again will show that international agencies like UN can still be force for good, can still help a lot, to solve the crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very good. Medea, do you want to comment on what Dennis has said here?
Well, I think it's a great idea. I'd be totally supportive of a demilitarized zone. And I know that there are a number of international groups that have actually gone there and tried to do a people's version of this. But, this is much more than individuals can take on. We certainly need the United Nations.
Absolutely. I'm going to call on Karl Grossman in a minute, a great nuclear expert, but I want to give people very quickly the potential scope of a disaster at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is pretty much incomprehensible. I mean, we're talking about 6 very large reactors. There's far more radiation involved in Zaporizhzhia than there was at Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a relatively new reactor. These reactors have been operating for a while, and the fuel pools are loaded. The amount of radiation that could come out of a disaster at Zaporizhzhia would dwarf Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and certainly approach Chernobyl and Fukushima, probably by multiple factors. So Medea, it's great to hear you. I hope you've got time to stick with us. And before we go into the politics of the war, I want to deal with this with a couple of experts. Nobody knows more about nukes than Karl Grossman. And then Howie, if we can mention Howie Hawkins, and then Tatanka Bricka, so we can mention the actual mechanics of this petition. Dennis, I noticed there are only 600 signatures on that petition. Is that the only one that's going around? Dennis, are there more petitions?
There were few competing petitions, earlier petitions, with slightly different flavor, but yes, that's yeah. Okay. I mean, it's growing. We posted I think a little bit more than a week ago, I think, or a week ago. So hopefully, everybody could just spread the word, and this will get together. And again, this is the UN can still do a lot. We would like to emphasize, despite all the negative sort of things that we see, but it still can do this. It still can save.
I don't know who else could. I mean, Medea, I know that you've been desperately working for peace for quite a while in Ukraine. Has the UN been any help at all in bringing peace to Ukraine?
Well, the UN has been involved in the grain deal, which unfortunately Russia just pulled out of, and the Secretary General has been verbally very supportive, but I think there's a lot more that they could do, and people, we have friends who are staff in the UN, and they have been getting staff members of the UN by the hundreds to be pushing that the UN get more involved. So yeah, they certainly could do more, and this is one example.
What has been the holdup? I mean, you would think that the UN would have been involved a long time ago. What's keeping the UN from getting involved there, Medea?
Well, as I said, it's not that they're not involved. It's more what can they do that's outside I mean, let's face it, they get most of their funding comes from the US. They have a Security Council that's dysfunctional because of the veto power of the Big Five. And so it's hard to get anything done when they have been mostly doing things like having General Assembly sessions where different measures have come up, but those are really just symbolic. Many of them are to condemn Russia, but then even the countries that vote to condemn Russia have turned around and said, well, we don't want to comply with the sanctions, and we really don't want to get involved in a war between the US and Russia as they see it. So the UN has so many bureaucratic and just internal obstacles to getting things done.
Well, we admire your continued efforts. Karl Grossman, do you want to comment on the nuclear situation? Howie on the petition to the UN, and Tatanka, and then we'll go to Wynn Finerman and Wendy Lederman. Go ahead, Karl.
Yeah, what I would suggest people read is the work of Bennett Ramberg, and on the chat I put in the a connection to a most recent article. It's from last year. It was on Project Syndicate. He wrote the book. This is 1985, Nuclear Power Plants as Weapons for the Enemy. And through the years, and I'm talking now about more than, like 3 decades, I've quoted from his book and I've quoted from his writings. I think this is very important because a nuclear power plant is and this has been said by others, a pre-deployed weapon of mass destruction. And as Bennett writes in this most recent piece on Project Syndicated, there is no international convention that bans attacks on nuclear plants in wartime. The International Atomic Energy Agency has made little headway, and I don't know how much of a push it's given, in persuading the Conference on Disarmament. This is part of the UN. It's out of Geneva, to adopt a new protocol, because the only protocol that exists is the only global accord that even purports to address the matter, and Bennett cites it. And let me just go on for a few minutes. In this article, and again, I provided the link, Bennett traces the first attack at a nuclear power plant to 1980, when Iran went after the Osirak nuclear plant in Iraq. Didn't cause great damage. 9 months later, Israel got involved and did destroy that plant. He goes on about how during the 1991 Persian Gulf War, both Iraq and the United States targeted active nuclear sites. And then I'm reading from the piece, and I'll just be brief here. That brings us back to Russia's war in Ukraine, which involves a threat to nuclear reactors unlike anything we've ever seen before. He speaks about Russia locating missiles and artillery in Zaporizhia, has turned the installation into a military base from which it has launched munitions. And he talks about the fallout risk. And then this is really important because it's not just Ukraine where you could have nuclear power plants involved in war. Here, Bennett talks about East Asia and China rumblings about taking Taiwan for force, putting a spotlight on the island's 2 active nuclear power plants. Moreover, China has numerous reactors on its southern coast that could become Taiwanese military targets. North Korea has, it goes on and on and on. India and Pakistan. I mean, there really has to, just let me get to the end of Ramberg's piece here, which again, I really suggest folks read this. Now that the war in Ukraine has laid bare the risk we face, the international community has no excuse besides getting action on this issue. The world needs a formal convention that bans attacks on nuclear reactors and related facilities. I mean, this is also a very big reason why there shouldn't be nuclear power, period. And in my view, every nuclear power plant in the world, or 400 plus, should be shut down for all the hazard, all the threat they pose to life. But certainly, this is a very specific issue. It's getting hotter and hotter as the decades have gone by, and it should be on the agenda of every peace group, peace organization, and every safe energy anti-nuclear organization. Again, the name of Ramberg's book, and get it, it's 1985, published by the University of California Press, but all the points in the book are still, if not even more so, critical today. Nuclear power plants as weapons for the enemy.
Okay, thank you. And we also have to remember, of course, that when the people who took down the World Trade Center were planning their attack, at least according to the reports we have, they did contemplate hitting the Indian Point reactors just north of New York City. Howie Hawkins, you want to comment quickly on the attempt to get the UN involved, and then we will back to Medea and Dennis, and then we'll go to Tatanka.
Yeah, I'm going to post in the chat again that article that Dennis referred to by Taurus Billis, which really goes into why this is politically feasible. There are about 35 countries that abstained from condemning Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And they did so for economic and geopolitical reasons. But this resolution would not be directly crossing Russia. It would be about protecting all of us all around the world. So politically, we could get a lot more countries. It would be a much stronger resolution. And then Russia might feel politically compelled to say, okay, we're withdrawing our military forces and the UN peacekeepers will take over. That's the political strategy there. And urge people to, read Taurus's article and then get involved in spreading this. I mean, Medea, if you can get Code Pink and Peace in Ukraine Coalition behind this petition, that will help a lot. It's a really serious situation. I mean, I don't think it's been mentioned that Ukrainian intelligence believes the cooling pond has been mined and that there may be mines on top of 2 of the reactors. And then they pulled out the top management from Rosatom away from the reactor as of July 5th, which may indicate something may be up. So we can't wait. This is a real serious situation. So again, I urge everybody to sign that petition and spread it around. And I think this is something that's politically feasible in the UN. I mean, I think Medea was right. They pass resolutions and they don't do anything. But we got to put pressure on, at least the United States to push this in the UN General Assembly.
Medea, do you want to comment on that?
No, as I said, I think it's a positive thing, and I look forward to reading more about it.
Okay, Dennis, did you want to make a mention? Then we'll go to Tatanka, Lynn Feinerman, and Wendy Liederman.
Yeah, so thank you for this, for the positive feedback for the petition. And indeed, the news from, I didn't want to cite the most recent news about how we did, it's kind of scary, to be honest. There's scary reports coming out. So indeed, the situation is rather much more urgent than I was trying to depict, but and it's politically absolutely feasible. That's Taras Belous's article, I think, makes a strong case for this. And in fact, it's actually absolutely, Zelensky was pushing for this earlier this year, but unfortunately now sort of more of a panic kind of reporting is coming from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But this is I think everybody in the world would welcome this.
Well, as someone who has interviewed people downwind from 3 Mile Island in 1980, and then been to Kyiv for the conference, the 10th anniversary of Chernobyl, and who marched against Fukushima, I am absolutely terrified. I would have to say, in my world, as a historian, that this is probably the most dangerous situation the world has faced since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And there is nothing that could compare in terms of destruction of human health and safety or the natural environment to the worst case scenario, or even not even the worst case scenario at Zaporizhzhia. Thank you for that, Dennis. Thank you, Medea. Tatanka Bricka, and then Lynn Feinerman and Wendy Wiederman. Tatanka, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll just share a personal story to underlie what Medea has been talking about for ever since this started, is that this is a proxy war between the major powers. It's largely been framed between Ukraine and Russia, but we are very much involved. This story will talk about the plans behind the plans, so amount of humility, people who are citizens of the United States, and you can have no truth and reconciliation without truth. So 1976, I completed a campaign I worked for my friend David Harris, who just recently passed, who ran for Congress in the peninsula. The campaign ended the first week of November, and I got a call in the third week of November, 1976, which is almost 50 years ago, from a couple that was an ideal campaign couple. They put 32 people in the seats. They each had checkbooks. They made calls. They walked precincts, etc. They called me into their office. They happened to be working at Stanford Research Institute, which became Stanford Research International, when Stanford students protested the CIA's involvement there and the Defense Department with, around Silicon Valley and David Packard, etc. So I found out that was their place of work. I came in and they said, we would like to offer you a job. We think it'd be you'd be ideal for this. And I said, what does it pay and what will I do? And when will it start? And it was a nearly $200,000 a year job in 76 for somebody who's a community organizer and out of work. It's highly attractive. I said, what will you do? What would I do? I said, well, it involves travel, it involves per diem, and have a seat. So I had a seat. They said, okay, we'll be frank with you. 15 years from now, there will be no Soviet Union. And it's the first time I'd heard that in 1976. I said, what do you do? He said, well, we're working in the Soviet republics to bring democracy. And I said, and they said, well, yeah, there's a lot of resources there that we can connect with our corporations, et cetera. What is it you want me to do? Well, we need help on our Ukraine team, and we think you would be ideal, and within a year you could run the whole operation. Well, okay, I also know you have a 50-year plan. I knew by now I wasn't going to take the job, but I wanted to get some information. They said, I know you have a 50-year plan. What is that? And they went through decade by decade. They took me into the room. They showed me Ukraine, strategic importance, the history, the breadbasket of the world, et cetera. And they said, shortly after the year 2020, the US will very likely be at war with Russia, whoever the president is. And there will be a need for Russia to be involved in and they went like this, print the quotes, our defensive arrangement of NATO. And the whole thing was because we needed to have Russia, after it had gotten rid of its ethnic provinces, to join the rest of the Caucasian nations of Europe to isolate China. That was our real enemy. Now, this is nearly 50 years ago. So yes, there's no excuse for anybody invading Ukraine, but Putin is easily to make the bad guy. There's a larger thing at work here. So we have to be first understand that this is a proxy war. And these things take their long time plan, and that truth and reconciliation is needed. And I'm so happy to hear everybody speaking. I will read these books. I will sign this petition and try to get the word out, because it is a tragedy for everybody involved in war all the time, but it is a major global tragedy, potentially for all life on Earth. So
yeah, and thank you for that,
hesitate.
Tatanka. And as we, well, let's move ahead. Lynn, thank you very much, Tatanka. Did you want to comment, Medea or Dennis, before we move ahead? No? Okay. Lynn, oh, go ahead, Dennis, very quickly.
with all due respect, this is not a proxy war in any sense, in any reasonable sense. So first of all, if it were a proxy, I mean, so first of all, right, the Ukraine has so why in principle the military aid to Ukraine from the United States is actually not only morally justified but also actually legally can be justified, is due to the document which is called the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed in 1994 with the United States, UK, Russia, and Ukraine, where Ukraine, as a possessor of the third largest nuclear arsenal at that time, give up all its nuclear weapons in this in exchange for the assurance, for the security assurance from once again Russian Federation, UK, US. And unfortunately, this document is not actually, only some Republicans mentioned this occasionally, but this is a big deal. Plus, Ukraine also signed the Treaty on the Conventional Forces. Is a co-signatory on conventional forces in Europe, where actually lots of weapons were actually transferred to Russia from Ukraine, like several thousand tanks, like hundreds of armed personal carrying vehicles, etc., many missiles. So it's, you know, and we see that there's not even weapons in NATO, right, to actually defend, to support large-scale invasion. And if it were in proxy war, why would Russian TV claim that, you know, we want to do a genocide in Ukraine, right? Openly calling for killing 2,000 Ukrainians. So it's a more complicated than that. It's not a proxy war. It's a United States is doing its obligations according to the Budapest Memorandum. Okay, well, we're getting into the partisan weeds here, but we do have 15 more minutes, and this is expected. Lynn, and then Wendy, go ahead, and then Feinerman.
Okay. First of all, I would like to say I entirely support Karl Grossman's proposal for protection and shutting down of all the nuclear power plants, and whatever contractual or treaty situation we can put up there, I'm for it. Second of all, I think that a lot of the conversation is about, again, Russia's war in Ukraine or Ukraine's war with Russia. I think we need to take Tatanka's experience and instruction very seriously. This is a proxy war. The United States has 800 plus military bases around the world. It wants to control the world, and it is conducting proxy wars on all levels. I think that it's very difficult for someone like Medea, who wants to bring people together, to even broach a subject like this. And certainly she can't get on radio or TV a lot doing it. So she's taken the wisest and most subtle approach to actually just trying to get a treaty or at least a ceasefire of some kind. But somehow, someday, we are going to have to face the fact that the United States has an aggressively controlling and destructive foreign policy, and that involves proxy wars, what we call proxy wars, with all due respect to Dennis and his viewpoint. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wendy Learman.
Thank you. And thanks so much, especially for Medea, for being with us and all the amazing work you've done through the years. I hope everyone here has followed her prolific work just to bring peace to the world, which just seems almost like a dirty word after being at war for 20 years constantly. From what I understand, there was actually some sort of peace agreement that was come to with Zelensky and Putin back in March of 2022. And days later, Boris Johnson went to take a visit to Ukraine, and then they pulled out of it and NATO stepped in. And, you know, we can talk about the
and Bucha happened, right? The massacre, right? When was liberated and corpses were discovered, right?
Thank you. So there were peace agreements made because, I mean, right now the globe is facing climate catastrophe. I'm in South Florida now, and we're roasting. I mean, there's so many things enemies we face as a global species, and for the entire world to be teetering on the border of world war for this one thing, when there's so many other factors happening in Africa and everywhere, it doesn't make sense to me. And the trillions of dollars basically we're sending over there now while people are starving in our streets doesn't need to happen. So I know Medea brought up NATO for a moment before. I don't know if she wants to comment a little bit on that and just how close we could be to World War III and what we as a people can do to pressure our representatives to start negotiations and become a leader in peace and diplomacy again, because we are on a suicidal track and we cannot continue. It is not sustainable for us or our planet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Medea mentioned there's three types of weapons we're sending there. Cluster munitions, which we talked about last week, a real nightmare. The DU, the depleted uranium, it makes it into a nuclear war on the low level, but it's still a nuclear war. And then the treaty on the mines that we have refused to sign. Wendy, I'm sorry, Medea, Wendy mentioned you. Do you want to say something in response?
I think it's important to bring up this issue of NATO because next year NATO is going to be hosted in the US in Washington, DC. Its summit will be July 9th through 11th. We have no idea where things will be in the war in Ukraine, but we have to know that NATO is not a defensive alliance. It's a warfare alliance. It's an aggressive military alliance. At their meeting in Vilnius, they invited those countries in the Asia Pacific that are key to the US, and that is New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, and Japan, to strengthen that partnership to confront China. So NATO is already setting its sights on China. Anybody who cares about peace in the world, who doesn't want to see nuclear confrontation, should see NATO as an alliance that must be dissolved. And so we're already starting to look at how we can organize for next year to bring people in the United States who care about the environment, people who care about poverty, race issues, whatever it is. If you want to see the $1 trillion that the US is spending on militarization instead spent on dealing with the climate crisis and global poverty and pandemics, then we really ought to unite no matter our differences and focus on how are we going to move towards the dissolution of NATO.
I just want to interrupt here. Thank you for that, Medea. Thank you very much. I hope, by the way, you'll put the contacts for Code Pink in the chat. This has been, for those of you listening to us on the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness show on Progressive Radio Network, we're nearing the end of our first hour. We've been talking with Medea Benjamin of Code Pink and Dennis Bondar from Ukraine on the war in Ukraine and the horrific dangers we face at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, and the request, the movement to get the United Nations to make a demilitarized zone around the Zaporizhzhia plant. This dialogue will continue in the second hour, but you won't hear it at PRN. If you want to swing over and hear the rest of it, we're at electionprotection2024.org, electionprotection2024.org. Thank you, Dylan, Rodney, for engineering us at Progressive Radio Network, and glad to have you with us for another week. And as I say, we will continue. Go to electionprotection2024.org. Justin, and then Dorothy Reich. Go ahead, Justin.
Sure. I've heard some folks mention economic leverage and climate change. I'd like to see the United States put its money where its mouth is and do the same kind of thing it did with China regarding the 5G and spying, in which Biden actually they called it decapitated the silicon industry in China by saying that anybody who consulted with or worked with the Chinese on chip technology going even as far back as the 90s, that technology that old, would lose their citizenship protections and even international military protections by doing so. And so a comparable thing for Russia would be anybody who works in their oil industry and their oil fields loses their international protections as well. so that there actually is some economic leverage, because Russia is still largely not only an oil economy, they're largely a contractor economy, that if they don't get help from the outside, they can't even prop themselves up.
Okay, thank you for that, Justin. Very interesting. We appreciate it. William Bronson, you're raising your hand, and then we'll go to Dorothy and Howie. William, did you want to say something before I go to Dorothy? Go ahead, William.
I just wanted to urge Dennis to contact the Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is a crucial physicians organization that played a very key part in the struggle in the 60s and 70s. And I sent him the phone number and name of the Sacramento leader of PSR in order to get to the national. I don't know where the national is any longer. PSR has been rather silent, but I think it would be a very important crowd to mobilize for the petition. That's all I had to suggest.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I received. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And a PSR would be a great group to circulate this petition. If nothing else comes out of this call that's tangible, aside from people getting Medea's book, I would hope that we can push this petition, because God help us all. Dorothy Reich, go ahead, Dorothy, and then Howie. Dorothy Reich, you need to unmute. Did you just disappear? There you are. Okay, go ahead.
You know, years ago, there was an article in The Intercept, and I can never find it, but it described a meeting between the Wall Street analysts and the defense industry, where the defense industry said to the Wall Street analysts, "Do not fear, because when the war in the Middle East is over, there's always the Far East." And today there's another article, and the article says that, well, the defense industry now is really just pushing for a Cold War with China to build up their military, production, and they're not looking now for a hot war with China, because I think they've realized that that's too destructive. I mean, they like their iPhones, they don't want a hot war with China. But I think this war in Ukraine is kind of keeping them going. They want to keep it going. There's a lot of money to be made, and they don't see any upside for them to end this war. It's like what Lyndon Johnson said: I can't stop the war in Vietnam. My friends are making too much money. I mean, the defense, the lobbyists for the defense industry are just across the street from the White House. There would be articles about it when Biden first got elected. So,
well, no matter what, Dorothy, you're right. I mean, no matter which side you're on, the military industry is profiting from this war. And, the thing about the Zaporizhzhia issue and global warming, as Medea says, and the other climate issues, it doesn't matter which side you're on, and whether you think it's a proxy war or not, Zaporizhzhia is not going to discriminate if those radioactive clouds go out of those reactors.
I was just laughing with my friend. I said I thought, I wasn't going to live to see this major global warming, because it kept saying 2030, 2040. I said I'll be gone, but no, I'm still here, and now it's global warming, and I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't know if I'm glad to still be alive or not, because God knows what's in store for us now. I thought I was gone when this all happened.
The pavement in Las Vegas today is 160 degrees. So if you want to cook your dinner, just take a frying pan out on the street and put it down there. Thank you, Dorothy. Howie Hawkins, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think as progressives, our duty is to be in solidarity with the oppressed. And when you come to Ukraine, the only imperialist army that invaded Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of troops used cluster munitions on civilians, depleted uranium shells on tanks, and has mined an area the size of the nation of Austria, is Russia. When we provided arms to the Red Army, did that make the USSR a proxy of the United States? I really think that's insulting to the people of Ukraine who are fighting for their lives. And we can see that. It's a people's war. It's not just the people in the armed forces. It's the whole society is mobilized to provide mutual aid and humanitarian aid to the third of the country that's been displaced from their homes, and, have had to become refugees or internally displaced people. Now, every war of national liberation like Ukraine's, all the imperialist powers try to influence it. That just, is the nature of world imperialism. But, what people like Dennis and his group, Sociální Ruch, the social movement say is, we're fighting both Russian tanks and Western banks. I mean, they get it. They know that Western imperialism is not on the side of the working class and the popular classes in Ukraine. I'm gonna put 2 articles in the chat. One of them's by Dennis and another one, they're both by this left group from Sociální Ruch, about the question of negotiations. And, I think when we come to regarding what the Ukrainians want, we need to listen to them. They're fighting for their survival.
Okay, thank you for that. As I say, our main focus is on the petition for the Zaporizhzhia, but I've gotten it from both sides. In fact, I had a publication I used to write for that has ceased taking my articles because I had someone on our Zoom call that he didn't agree with on Ukraine. So it's a very hot button item. We have 94 people with us. We're at the top of the hour. Medea, Dennis, I will understand if you need to go. You've been with us a full hour, but we are going to continue. Josh Fox will join us, and later on, we will talk about his project. Medea, you wave your hand. So, do you want to give us a final word before you go?
Yes, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Unlike what Howie says, I think our job as progressives is to end war, not fuel war. Our job is to find other ways of dealing with each other, to do everything we can to promote diplomacy and peace talks, to do everything we can to stop the militarization of our world. And I hope people, when they think about this issue, just have a little refrain in the back of your head that keeps saying, war is not the answer, war is not the answer, because it is not the answer. So thank you again for the opportunity. Let's work together to find a way to end this war, to stop a war with China, stop the war in Sudan. Let's just stop war and deal with the climate crisis. Thank you.
Yes, and clearly, whoever's right or wrong, if it continues, we'll all be dead. So thank you for that, Medea. Thank you for your lifetime of activism. I hope you come back and join us for the next big issue that comes up. But keep
Great,
up.
thanks so much. Great.
Thank you. Dennis, I'm going to give you the same courtesy. We're at the top of the hour. Did you want to say something? Do you need to go? Do you need to stay with us? Hold on, you're muted there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I can stay, no problem, for a bit more. So I just wanted to say that, in principle, actually, I've prepared a couple of slides, if you want me to show them about the polling data from Ukraine, what people think. So
well,
actually,
we've got some people on the hook here. Let's let them speak, and then we'll get to your slides. And I think Josh Fox will join us at some point, and we'll proceed with him as well. Howie, thank you for that comment. Much appreciated. And again, you two guys are circulating primarily this petition to the UN. To me, if there was ever a time for the UN to show its worth, this is it. I mean, the UN intervention in Suez was actually very successful, and God knows we need them again. Howie, can you tell us again how to get the petition to the United Nations to get them to intervene here?
Yeah, I'll post it in the chat again. Give me a second.
This petition is to ask the United Nations General Assembly to send peacekeepers in to take over at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. And, God help us. There are those of us who know too much about nuclear power. And I'm nervous enough living in Los Angeles downwind from the Diablo Canyon reactors. I don't need to think about the Zaporizhzhia reactors as well. It's a little more than any nervous system can take. Mary Butler Stonewall, then Barbara Wimsatt, and Martin Melkonian. Mary? I'm waiting for Josh Fox to come on, so we'll let him know. Go ahead, Mary.
All right, I just got 3 points. I'll make them quick.
Please.
All right, number one, I'm really upset that people aren't looking back in the American and Russian history and realizing that during Bush Senior era to Bush Jr., right in that era, that Putin tried to retire and he was told that his family would be murdered if he retired from what office. That is a militant state. It is the military that is running it. Putin's just a head dressing for the military. And if you can see this, because he's kissing the hand of every military head officer that he meets, he bows and kisses their hand. He is subservient to the militant government that is running Russia at this point.
Okay.
Secondly, I have friends that are Ukrainian and Russian, and they tell me they don't want the war. And we have suggested that possibly we need to come from both ends of the border on either side where the war is happening and slowly make a human chain across that battlefield of non-armed citizens from both Russia and the Ukraine holding hand in hands in solidarity to stop the war. And then third and final comment is we've also been talking about creating the World Citizens Coalition for Community Sovereignty. And this is due to the fact that many countries like the Ukraine and other countries around the world that have gotten their country as their own, they are still handicapped and have no way of living without the assistance of other countries. So we need to put them in a position that they are not dependent on other countries to survive, so they don't find themselves in this situation again. Thank you.
Very good, Mary. Thank you. That was very interesting. I appreciate that. Barbara Wimsatt, and then had a doctor who wanted to speak, but I don't know where he went. Go ahead, Barbara. Barbara Wimsatt. I unmuted you. Huh?
Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay. So a couple of things. I was just, it seems like there is a gradual lessening of support in the US for the war, which is a good thing. And I'm wondering, but I don't see what Biden's off-ramp is. I mean, he doesn't give any impression that there is an off-ramp. Now, it could be the nuclear issues, which I would say it's unfortunate that we had to wait for a nuclear catastrophic possibility in order to have people really get on the right side of this. But in any case, I think perhaps that would give Biden an off-ramp for this war, and which is something that we desperately need, because it's just insane what's happening with our environment, and war is making things so much disastrously worse. But if anybody has any ideas of how Biden can get out of it, without losing face, with the election coming up, he doesn't want to lose face. And so what can be done other than more and more threats of a nuclear disaster to have an off-ramp on this? Now, in the beginning, I believe I'm correct about this, Russia was simply asking for a semi-independent Donbass region. And that was covered up as Russia threatening. So, I think if we can go back to that, maybe a semi-independent Donbass region would be a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tatanka Bricka, did you want to jump in here? And then I had someone who had a hand, and I don't know where he went. We're at 82 people now. Go ahead, Tatanka.
I don't disagree. The tragic thing about this is everything Howie's said and what Dennis has said, I don't disagree with it. I just am amazed at the long-term orchestration of things. I guess I'll just mention that in 1992, after the wall had gone down, and many of us were talking about a peace dividend, and maybe we don't have to do these forever wars, Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and the gang got together and created what is called the Defense Department Pentagon planning document in which they said that we need to have a new Northern Industrial Alliance. We don't learn in our history that the colonizing robber barons of Europe, this is what they called themselves, the forces that colonized all the continents, the Northern Industrial Alliance. A new Northern Industrial Alliance, and they named all the countries, and they said that will now include something that I mentioned in my story, that will now include Russia now that they've spun off all the ethnic provinces. The original mission of the Northern Industrial Alliance is to avail ourselves of the raw materials of the planet to which we are entitled. And this is back in the 14, 15, 1600s, right? Doctrine of discovery, etc., which is responsible for us decimating our native population, slavery, etc. Underneath our defense, underneath it, there is that kind of ethic that has been updated to say we need to have access to the world's raw materials to sustain our way of life, not to have our way of life threatened. This is the position that we come to now. But that, I just want to say that is underlying a lot of this. And so we have to come clean with that and find a way to create an international society of partnership without being Pollyannish about it. Yes, it's a war of liberation, but we are still at that stage where it's nonviolence or non-existence. The stage where Martin Luther King, now fully just about 75% of our entire US budget is military. And so we have come to a place of spiritual bankruptcy, as King said. That's all.
Thank you for that. Steve Kaiser, then we're gonna, Dennis, you had some slides you wanted to show, so we can do that. And I'm waiting for Josh Fox to come on. He was gonna join us next. By the way, I did advertise on the fly. We're gonna discuss the movie Oppenheimer, Greg Mitchell and Karl Grossman. But the scheduling became challenging. We're doing next week. If anybody gets a chance to see the movie Oppenheimer between now and next week, take it, and then we will discuss that film. I've seen the trailer and read things about it, but apparently it's only in theaters, and I had assumed it was going to be online. But next week we will do our discussion on Oppenheimer. Steve Kaiser, then Dennis Bernstein, and then we'll go back to Dennis Bondar. Go ahead, Steve.
Somebody was mentioning Putin's or Biden's off-ramp. I think we ought to look to see what kind of off-ramp that Putin might have in this and what motivates them. In the early 90s, we had made a deal in part culminating with these Budapest Accords with the Russians that we would not move NATO further east. And what we've done is we've jammed NATO up every single orifice on the Russian body state at this point. And I think just to really get a perspective on this, I highly recommend a guy named Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And I think that this is what, nefarious forces behind the scenes have in mind, that they want to break up the 80-unit Russian Federation to be able to secure their natural resources, which are massive and to a large degree undeveloped. So what we need to focus on here is how Putin can get out of this. And I'm not optimistic about his longevity in his office. I've seen other entrenched leaders over history blunder into something like this. It goes really awful. And they generally are not too long around for a while. And if nothing else, they need a scapegoat for what went wrong. And the way the Russian military has acquainted itself is you can hardly look at a worse scenario than this. The real winning entity on the battlefield right now are Western missiles of some sort. They're knocking out all these fighter aircraft, attack helicopters, tanks, ships, everything. And the Russians are really coming off, their military is kind of a joke. So in figuring out a way for the denouement of all this, we have to look at Putin's off-ramp. And I imagine he's going to want to take some of those territories in the Ukraine that is inhabited mostly by Russians to begin with. So anyway, that's my point of view. We're not looking at the right thing. We've jammed NATO up their nose, and that's why they're getting solidarity. But the Russians just want to flee from this now. I think we just need to look at the Russian perspective, and that's not getting a whole lot of verbiage. That's enough for me.
Thank you. Dennis Bernstein, and then we'll go to Dennis Bondar and then Ron Leonard. Dennis?
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
You got me?
Yeah.
Listen, I'd like to read a few paragraphs in the context of Oppenheimer and the impacts, the deep impacts that the nuclear age has had on all of us for so many years. Forgive me, I have COVID. I did a series of articles called Writers Against Nuclear Madness. I did not realize at one point I was writing to one of the builders of the atomic bomb that worked with Oppenheimer. His name is, he's a sound poet named Byrne Porter. Porter, author of over 50 books, was a consulting physicist to the Manhattan Project under General Groves and Dr. Oppenheimer. Porter also worked with Albert Einstein on the preliminary research which led to the eventual development of the atomic bomb. And this is what he wrote after all those folks sitting in the University Club, University of California. This is what happened to some of them after they saw the results of their bomb, of their work after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Leaving the dining room of the faculty club, University of California, after more than a pleasant lunch, I entered the club's lounge, picked up that morning's edition of the New York Times to read not only that a bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, but also exactly what I had been doing with my life and my talents the past 4 years at Princeton, Oak Ridge, Berkeley. One physicist reader started crying, screaming in wild, destructive frenzy, and had to be carried out, strapped tightly to a stretcher. Another dazed voluntarily stumbled to an asylum for relief. A third took off from Minnesota to become a dairy farmer. Myself, I am still numb after 37 years, yet strong enough to have lived since in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Norway, Russia, in a futile attempt to understand what took place that August day of 45. I am very sorry Madame Curie and Lisa Meitner did not keep their findings to themselves, that their facts ever got into the textbooks, that war makers pulled their ideas out and ran wild with them to destruction in the interests of nationalism and money. I am even more sad about my part in it all, even ashamed, and do here now apologize to all and sundry as if such as that could conceivably aid, even assuage my conscience now that time is too late. And of course, my confessing does not help in any way. It is too late. The monster is permanently out. War is a mental disorder of the highest order, a public manifestation that all who arrange, direct, participate are madly deranged by. The insanity touches us all, and we have nowhere to go. That's Byrne Porter, who one of the inventors of the bomb. And this thing about this concept about the war makers, what's driving me crazy at this point is not just the loose talk that happens about the possibility of a nuclear conflagration, but you got a whole bunch. A lot of you probably love MSNBC, but you got a march of military men who are selling their weapons, who are weapons salesmen, who have become Pentagon stenographers, along with the goddamn journalists at MSNBC and some of the other networks as well. Forgive me, but I'm a little sick in the head, and I'm sick from all of this.
Well, as well you should be, as another person living downwind from Diablo Canyon. We thank you for that, Dennis. And Dennis is the host of the Flashpoint show at KPFA. in Berkeley and a great poet and one of the true commentators of our day. So thank you for that, Dennis. Beautifully spoken. Dennis Bondar, then we'll go to Ron Leonard and Ruth Strauss. Sorry. Dennis Bondar, you had some slides you wanted to show?
Yes, yes, I have a couple of slides I would like to share you. I prepared them for, to give the context, how you, from Ukraine, basically, right? From the Ukrainian point of view on the war that is happening in Ukraine. So first of all, I urge you to check out this Wikipedia entry about the article that was published last year in Russia, state-owned media, which actually in Ukrainian was called like Russian Mein Kampf, which literally called for the total obliteration and destruction of Ukrainian state as well as identity. So this is just the motivation for the current war. Moreover, in May last year, the deputy of the Russian State Duma, Alexei Zhuravlev, on a primetime TV, called for genocide. He says this. Here's the snapshots. These 2 millions should have either left Ukraine or they should be denazified. That is, be exterminated. Literally on the primetime Russian TV. So for Ukrainians, this is a war of national liberation and survival. Now, I would like to share with you recent polling data from Ukraine about what Ukrainians think was happening. So this is, you see, the dates and links here below. So 78% of Ukrainians have either friends or relatives that have been either killed or injured in this war. 78%. On average, the respondents report 7 close relatives or friends that have been either killed or injured during this war. So this has affected the entire Ukraine. This is not something minor that is happening in the east or the south. Now, the poll about, very recent poll, June 6, about the what about territorial concession as the condition to end the war? As you can see that this question has been asked in May last year, 27, and repeated as many times, including May 23rd. Overwhelmingly, 84% people say no territorial concessions to end the war, even if the war will last longer and there will be threats to the preservation of independence. So this is a majority of Ukrainians reject this. Now, recent poll, very recent poll, March 12th, about what about Crimea? How should we liberate Crimea? So 68% say that we should keep fighting. We should even consider military option for liberating Crimea, if that means a longer war with Russia and diminishing help from the West. Again, this is the poll from Ukraine. You may ask a question, okay, but these are polls conducted by Kyiv International, in Ukraine by Ukrainian Sociological Polling Institute. Maybe this is biased somehow. Okay, so let's take a look at the poll done by Munich Security Conference. So before the event, they actually run extensive polling. Again, the reference is at the bottom of the slide. So they basically reproduce these numbers, the same numbers. In fact, I would like to draw your attention to this particular answer. Whether we should, so the question is whether we should keep fighting or surrendering. So even if Russia is using tactical nuclear weapons against Ukrainian city, 89 respondents says we still should keep fighting. 89%. So this is, this is not a joke, right? This is a very serious stuff. Again, the same Munich Security Conference, organization in Germany, the same poll. What is the view on the ceasefire? This is data from November 22nd, as you can see. So only acceptable scenario where 93% of respondents accepted is that Russia removes all troops from Ukraine, including Crimea, right? Any other partial withdrawal is not satisfactory to the population. Just again, to give you
just a quick reminder, we're into the second hour, and we do have Josh Fox waiting to speak to us about the
Dennis,
topic.
can you wrap this real quick, please?
Yeah. So I want to say that NATO. I want to show this slide about the.
I want to welcome you, by the way, Josh. Your
popularity of
fun, and we'll be with you in a couple minutes.
Yeah, one second. Yes. So Ukrainians believe that NATO or a security assurance between Western countries is the only way for a lasting peace in Ukraine. And why do they believe? Look, this is an interesting plot because before 2014, NATO, most of the Ukrainians were against NATO, joining NATO. After the first invasion of Russia to Ukraine, the NATO become more and more popular. So, so this
Dennis.
is, you have to understand these reasons for these opinions that people express from Ukraine. Thank you for.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to. We're not going to be
Thank
able
you,
to
Dennis.
solve the
Okay.
war. We're just against the meltdowns of the nuclear facilities. But we really do appreciate your insights. This is a little bit beyond the purview of this Zoom, and we do appreciate everything you have to say.
And Dennis, we're going to continue to support. I hope you'll continue to support the use of UN security forces to create a demilitarized zone at Zaporizhzhia.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And this is for many people. I won't speak for anyone in particular, but for many people, taking sides, one side or the other in this war, is far transcended by the understanding that we have to avoid a nuclear conflagration at all costs, and that we have to get those nuclear plants under control. And I think at this point, the only people that could do it are the UN. So we welcome your advocacy on that, along with Howie, and please everybody sign that petition. I'm going to give Ron and Ruth Strauss, and then we'll quickly, and then we'll go to Josh Fox for the last half hour of our hour. We've been at this for almost 90 minutes, and we really appreciate having Medea on and having you, Dennis, in this hotbed of controversy. And but there's no controversy about the nuclear terror we all face. Josh Fox, I don't see you. Are you on with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much for having me. Can you guys hear me?
We can. We have 2 people left to speak. We have 69 people on the call, and then we'll go right to you.
Okay, I don't need that much time, but
well, you'll have it. So let's
your time.
talk to Ron Leonard, one of our great experts on renewables. Of course, we can always say that if Zaporizhzhia had been a wind farm, none of this would be happening. And I think that's a reasonable case to make. Ron, and then Ruth Strauss, and then we'll go to Josh Fox. Go ahead, Ron.
If we could have used the money that they spent on Zaporizhzhia. So the issue that I wanted to bring up, and it's a thing for you, Harvey, there's a great documentary on PBS on Putin. And it actually goes through his history up until now. And it's quite educational, both in terms of the motivation and how this could play out. And obviously Putin is the key player in terms of that. I wanted to discuss basically my feeling about the UN. There was one time I went there, I was invited to go. It was the time when a Brazilian expert was asked by the UN how to solve the energy problem worldwide. And he waltzed up to the podium and said, what you need to do is use renewable energy. And everybody stood there for minutes, stunned, hearing this. Because this guy was the expert. It was the UN's expert that was saying this. And this was about 2000 that he did that. Well, the UN came up immediately with a solution to his suggestion. They proposed a vote immediately thereafter to make nuclear energy a renewable energy. Fixed it.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that, Ron Leonard. And here we are 23 years later, and the issue is exactly the same. It's unreal. Ruth Strauss, please go ahead, Ruth, and then we'll go to Josh Fox.
I just wanted to make an announcement that there are, let me turn this down, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make an announcement that there was a fantastic documentary, not the film in theaters, but an MSNBC documentary called To End All Wars on Oppenheimer. It was riveting. It was shown once, but now it's available on Peacock. I don't get Peacock, but if anybody does, it is well worth watching. Apparently they have a free service. I've been trying to see whether that's on it. But anyway, if anybody can access it, it's not going to be fictionalized or IMAX type stuff that the movie is. It's just nuts and bolts. Live, footage of archival footage. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that, Ruth. I'll try and watch it next week. As I said, we're going to have Greg Mitchell and Karl Grossman to discuss the Oppenheimer film. I'm going to try and see it. Anybody else? I may actually go to an IMAX theater. Last theater I was in, I went to see Sing 2 with my grandchildren. It was a lot of fun, actually. So I will go to the IMAX and try and watch Oppenheimer. We will discuss that film next week. And thank you for that hint, Ruth Strauss. Okay, wow, what a discussion. We still have 66 people with us after 90 minutes. And now we've got Josh Fox wearing a New Orleans Saint hat. Josh is a great filmmaker, one of the truly pioneer activists on the fracking issue. I heard him speak at Tim Robbins's theater in LA a couple years ago, but he's a master filmmaker and has had a huge, I mean, a really huge tangible impact on the fracking issue. Very few people can claim the real movement that Josh has caused on the fracking issue. He has another production now that he wants to talk about, and he'll use the chat. And Josh, go ahead, tell us what you got.
Oh, thank you so much for that terrific introduction. Yes, I made Gasland Part 2, and a whole host of other films, including most recently the film on Standing Rock called Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock, which was on Netflix, which is a collaboration between myself and Native American filmmakers. I'm actually in the middle of 3 projects right now, one of which has just launched a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter project, the project we're raising funds for, and I just put the Kickstarter in the chat, I think twice, and someone else did too. Thank you so much. And thank you, by the way, to Russell Green for inviting me on this. That was so nice of him to just chime in and say, just tell everybody what you're doing. So back in 2020, I launched a program called Staying Home with Josh Fox, which was advocating people to stay home during COVID and was advocating very precisely for the government to start to support people to stay home, because as you know, if you were poor or middle class or didn't have savings or couldn't stay home, you were thrust back out into the disease. We were then subjected to culture wars that said we should reopen the economy, let grandma die, it'll be fine, you know, and people like Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, you know, were pushing exactly that. And they created a culture war out of the science that was surrounding COVID. There was one person in governments who stood up against this, and her name is Rebekah Jones. Rebekah Jones was the whistleblower who blew the whistle on Ron DeSantis, if you remember, back in 2020, and she completely blew up in the media. And she said the DeSantis administration is falsifying data, and they're using that to justify reopening the economy, and this is going to kill tens of thousands of people. Now, by the way, this was back in April or May of 2020, right? When we still could have very much gotten that disease under control. Instead, Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis pushed forward to reopen the economy, which basically meant telling poor and middle class people that they had to go back to work and they had to go get COVID and die for that billionaire class. And America became the center, the epicenter of the pandemic after those decisions. We have now normalized 1.2, 1.3 million deaths from COVID. And, you know, that was a policy decision. That was a policy choice. Those same people now are some of the most fascist elements in our government, in our country, in our world. Ron DeSantis running for president. And this story of Rebekah Jones really needs to be told. It's a story about truth. It's a story about blowing the whistle. It's also a story about misinformation and how people who do blow the whistle and who do come forward get attacked with vicious campaigns. If you may remember, Ron DeSantis had her house raided. She was lambasted in the media, probably one of the most targeted people that I can imagine. And I know this because I went through it. I was the fossil fuel industry public enemy #1 for quite a long time, subject to huge amounts of misinformation, lies, arson, death threats, slander, being followed around the country, 2 feature films being made about me trying to take down Gasland. Rebekah has gone through all of that and worse because she is because she's a woman, and she's suffering misogynistic attacks, sexist attacks, And it's gone on and on and on. She ran for Congress against Matt Gaetz. The Democrats did not get behind her. She lost that race. She's been the victim of a lot of smear. Having said that, she's also completely wild, brazen, shocking, bold, Erin Brockovich type, who is definitely ruffling a lot of feathers and is a fascinating person to follow, a fascinating person to understand and to see. So Rebekah, yeah, someone said in the comments, she just left Florida. The persecution was just way too much. I actually really urged her to leave Florida because it was just too dangerous at this point. So she is a political refugee from Florida. But you know, honestly, the film is going, it goes places that you will never expect. I'll just say that. The last 48 hours before the election with Matt Gaetz, one of the most astounding and crazy and weird moments I've ever experienced filming. But it is really also a comment on the DeSantis administration, on how we became so anti-science during this period of time. And we're just looking for your help. The last thing I'll say about this is we did 60 pitch meetings on this film, something like that. Crazy. And the distributors are now saying the quiet part out loud. They're saying it's too political, too political, too political, too political. I had the head of HBO, former head of HBO, tell me Gasland would never come out during this atmosphere. And that's true. We are in one of the most repressive media atmospheres that I've ever seen in my entire lifetime in the United States, and we don't even know it. We have 4 or 5 major corporations controlling everything that we watch, including documentaries. I was so happy to hear people mention documentaries and various different documentaries. So this is vital. We wouldn't be doing Kickstarter if we had that support. We're trying to raise about $55,000. As you know, the Kickstarter platform takes 10%. So we're trying to raise 60,000. We have 17 days to go. We just started a week ago. We are at about 20% fulfilled, but any help that we can get, whether that's direct donations or promoting it to your lists, extremely, extremely helpful. So I'm looking at all the comments here. Thank you so much for all those comments and those supports. And yeah, we really need help to get this film out.
Do you want to play the trailer? It's 2 minutes and
Sure,
30
go
seconds
ahead.
long.
Why not? Let's do
Play
it.
the trailer.
Okay.
Can you guys
Yeah,
arrange?
hold on.
Awesome. I'll mute myself while that's on.
And then we'll get Ruth Strauss and Barbara Wimsatt. Go ahead. There we are. We don't have sound there.
Let's try that again. Sorry.
And we're down to, we got 66 people still with us and 25 minutes to go to the top of the hour. But Josh, it's good to have you on. There we go.
To come for you one day.
Yeah.
Please, search warrant, open the door.
There are a lot of police outside right now at my house.
She is not the chief architect of our web portal. That is another false statement.
You'd think that would be the end of it. Obviously, she's got issues.
If we're not getting fully accurate data, then the concern is that we're making decisions based on politics.
To report, Rebekah Jones.
Rebekah Jones.
Rebekah Jones.
Rebekah Jones. Rebekah Jones.
Rebekah Jones, the woman at the center of it all, might face prison time.
Became famous because you pushed a coronavirus conspiracy theory.
Terminated for insubordination in May.
She's not a data scientist.
What you're alleging are a very serious crime. Officers were in your home
charged with breaking into their computer.
Jones is accused of hacking into Florida's emergency alert system.
Now Jones could face 5 years in prison if she's charged.
Your agents executed a search warrant
Against
on her
Rebekah
home
Jones
earlier
for
this month.
within
Officers were in your
saying that she
home.
wasn't a
charged with
whistleblower.
breaking-
The simple question is, what exactly were you asked to do that was so unusual and improper and, in your opinion, wrong?
So I'm going to go down before they do something and turn myself in.
At the end of the day, I've shown in Florida an ability to win huge swaths of voters that Republicans typically can't win, while also delivering the boldest agenda anywhere in the country.
As I said yesterday, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world.
Police, come down now!
Children! And I will never let them get away with what they did to my kids.
And I will be able to destroy leftism in this country and leave woke ideology on the dustbin of history.
I look beautiful?
Okay, that's amazing. Josh, you're a hell of a filmmaker. I just published a piece attacking Oliver Stone, who is also a hell of a filmmaker, but God forbid you should ever go the route he has just gone with nuclear power.
I'm sad about what's happened to him.
Yeah, what's happened? It'll never happen to you, though, Josh. So you are soliciting funds. We don't often let people on to do that, but given your great history, you have a Kickstarter here with the link, and we got a few hands for you. Ruth Strauss, did you want to talk to Josh Fox? Here, we've got 20 minutes to go. Ruth Strauss?
Okay. Josh, I hate to say it, but one of the funniest, ironically, things that I remember was your fracking film where you're in the kitchen of some guy who's living close to a fracking thing, and he turns on his faucet and puts a match to it, and the whole faucet blows up in flames. I mean, it was just so graphic and awful. I can't wait to see the Standing Rock thing, and of course, I'll contribute to this. I'm a physician. Woke goes to die in Florida, and so do people. And Ron DeSantis, I'm sure everybody knows this, but he covered up the statistics of the deaths in his state. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, I just want to say this as a physician, he was giving people Regeneron IV. Okay, so first of all, it's not just a day in the park to start an IV. And if you're doing it at outpatient centers, it's a surefire way to get infected with bacteria, never mind COVID. So, but anyway, I was like, okay, I'm pissed off. This must be costing a fortune, to give these IV things. So I go to Drug Facts and Comparisons, which is not the PDR, the Physician's Desk References, by a bunch of experts. I look up Regeneron and it's zero cost. And I'm like, WTF, zero cost? Well, it turns out the reason is because A, it's experimental, just like the vaccines were. It didn't, it had an emergency use authorization, just like the vaccine. And bonus, it's derived from fetal cells. So all those, people that are beating their chest about, women's rights and right to choose, it was just totally ironic. So thank you so much for doing this. I just feel terrible for Rebekah Jones.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Also, you should know that I believe it's the CEO of Regeneron is one of the most major campaign donors to DeSantis's campaign for governor in 2022. So DeSantis was promoting Regeneron and in fact saying to people that that's what they should do in response to COVID when it was not effective against Omicron or it was not effective against Delta. It was one of those two. But he had come out full bore and said, everyone can take Regeneron. Into Florida, it's whatever, you can get it at the local clinic. When in fact not disclosing the fact that the CEO was giving him millions of dollars. Millions of dollars.
Wow, that's exactly what we would.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Exactly what we would expect from a guy like Ron DeSantis. I hope your film will expose the fact that he's also gay. That's another story. Barbara Wimsatt, and then Wendy Lederman, please, and then Ruth Strauss.
So, hi, thanks, Josh. I hope now you'll make a movie about Ukraine. So do a documentary about what's going on there. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I think, maybe we just need to go back about the history a little bit, in which it was in 2015, I believe, that the US was already in Ukraine trying 2014, excuse me, trying to undermine any Russian influence there. And also we started putting weapons into Ukraine that early. And secondly, that Russia did try to negotiate with the US and we refused. And at the, before they were sort of sitting there waiting to see if the US would negotiate, and we did refuse. And all, I'm sorry, for you.
Well, we wanted to, okay, just go ahead. We wanted to focus on Josh's thing here, but go ahead.
Well, I thought this was about the war, excuse me.
Well, go ahead, just finish up and we'll move ahead.
Now, forget it. I mean, if you want to talk about Josh's film.
Well, do you want to make your final point, Barbara, on the war, and then we'll move ahead to Josh. We'll move ahead to Wendy and Dorothy. Barbara, did you want to say anything final about the war? Okay.
Slugger, she didn't want to.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Wendy, and then
Can I just respond to the Ron DeSantis is gay? I have no idea what Ron DeSantis's sexual preference is, nor do I think that that should in any way be held against him, no matter what his sexual preference is. But I will say that Ron DeSantis is one of the most bigoted people against LGBTQ folks, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people in our country. He has been going after trans people. He's been going after gay people. He passed the Don't Say Gay bill on the anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, which was the time very targeted shooting against gay and lesbian trans people at a gay nightclub in Florida. He's one of the most brazenly bigoted and homophobic people that we have in this country, and we are not holding him to account for that. The man is a pig, and it is absolutely so distressing to me. What he is employing, which also Donald Trump does, is called stochastic terrorism. When stochastic terrorism is hate speech focused on a particular group that you spread throughout the media landscape, and then somewhere there's going to be a terrorist attack influenced by that. So it's like heating up the popcorn in the bottom of the pan. You don't know which kernels are going to pop first, but you know some of them are going to pop, right? So when you have that kind of anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, you can lay at the feet of Ron DeSantis the nightclub shooting in Colorado Springs. You can say that this type of bigoted thing is causing truly insane people who are armed with AR-15s to go and murder our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. So I know that what you were saying was meant to be funny. I don't mean to be. I'm not lambasting you for that.
No, it wasn't. Actually.
But I wanted to just point out that we absolutely cannot tolerate this type of speech against our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and against our community.
Well, the theory, it wasn't actually meant to be funny. The theory is that anybody who's so completely obsessed with issues of sexual preference must have issues of his own.
Well, I just think that DeSantis is so completely obsessed with any type of culture war that he can glom onto. He's learned that from Donald Trump. Any kind of thing that can put him, anti-woke, anti-gay, all of the things in which anti-science that he can do to try to arouse the same type of bigoted support that Donald Trump has. He's trying to mimic that. Not to cut you off, but I honestly believe that he is one of the most brazen, self-serving politicians in that regard. I don't know what he believes in. He does come across as a sociopath, but all of those types of elements are because he's trying to get that culture war to drum up support for his own career, and that is one of the most dastardly and fascistic aspects about him.
Well, I and many others find him absolutely terrifying, but the assertion that he might be gay was not meant as to be funny. I mean, people who are we have such a history in this country of right-wingers who assault LGBTQ people and then turn out to be gay that, I think it's in keeping. Wendy Lederman, go ahead, and then Dorothy.
Thank you. It's so awesome to meet you, Josh. It's like such a great honor to have you here. And I'll just say I'm in South Florida, and I think one way we deal with it is like Langston Hughes says, you got to laugh to keep from crying. So a lot of people call him like Ron DeSantis, like he's self-loathing. He tortured people at Gitmo, we're finding. So it's one of these things where it's like he just can't stand himself, so he has to be so violent against others. And a lot of people don't realize we have like a huge homosexual population in South Florida. So I think it's also a way of like driving out the undesirables, like he's doing with the immigrants and all that. And so bring up a lot of great points. And they had Nazi rallies like in front of his rallies. So I mean, it's terrifying times. And just about it's so we're doing the best we can. I'm part of the Broward Progressive Caucus. I'm on the board here, and I've actually met Rebekah just a couple times. I don't know if she'd remember, but she's spoken with us, like taken some time, and she's super down to earth. Like you could tell she's just, everything she does is for people. Like she's just giving. And yeah, like she's really awesome. And I know she's friends with some of the leaders of our caucus. So anything we can do to help you, we definitely love to do that. And again, like Rebekah, like literally, I think all she did was reveal that the numbers were off of like how many people had COVID. Like it wasn't even like anything major. It was just like, wait, these numbers don't match up. And they like came for her life, like came for everything, came for her kids and all that. And just I'd love to talk to you more, Josh, about that and a few other things you brought up that hopefully maybe we can provide you support with. And also just kind of a side note, but my gut is telling me to tell you this, for a lot of your amazing environmental work that you do. We just had on a couple weeks ago my friend Maya Van Rossum, who authored Green Amendments, and she's been working with the kids. And yeah, so I'd love to link you with her, because I think that you guys could maybe uplift each other a lot. But I would love to connect with you more some other time, and just hopefully we'll have you back and you keep us posted on how things are going and how we can help you.
Thank you so much. I do know Maya Van Rossum, obviously from the Delaware, not obviously, but from the Delaware River Basin, which is where I'm from and where the Gasland movies originate. And she's the Delaware River Keeper. They're a terrific organization. In addition to the Rebekah Jones film, which we are right now sort of in crunch time trying to get ready. There's a film called The Welcome Table, which we're doing about climate refugees. That's going to HBO. So I can put that in the chat as well if you're interested. We are actually raising money for that movie too. We have a little bit of a backlog going on because of the anti-political film, the way that distributors have been very, very shy to deal with political films. And at the same time, I'm also making a film, or not making, but finished a film called The Edge of Nature, which is about long COVID. And it's also about the anthropause, the moment when the anthropause was the only time in our history that we actually reduced emissions enough to stop climate change, the first 10 months of COVID. So we learned how to stop climate change, and now we're just ignoring it completely and pretending that never existed. Amazing. The most difficult and intractable problem on the face of the earth. We're just like, we fixed it, but who cares? We're just going to go headlong into the opposite direction. So that's my third film, The Edge of Nature, The Welcome Table, and the Rebekah Jones Project. But seriously, our clock is ticking right now because of the Welcome Table. Because of the Kickstarter campaign on Rebekah Jones. So anything you guys can do to help push that out, send it out to your lists. Even $5, $10, basically we're raising 60 grand on Kickstarter. That's 600 people with $100, shouldn't be that hard to do, or, 1,200 people with $50, 6,000 people with $1, 60,000 people with $1. You know how it works. So we're 20% of the way there. We have 17 days left. So that's why I'm so grateful to Russell to invite me on today to talk about this.
Thank you, Josh. I want to thank, before we wind up here, Dennis Bondar. Dennis, if you're still with us, thank you for your presentation. Greatly appreciated. And we hope you'll come back. And Josh, just for your information, we spent much of the time in the first hour discussing the need for a UN intervention for a demilitarized zone at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which what's going on there is absolutely terrifying. And no matter what side one may take or feel about the war in Ukraine, the #1 danger to the human race probably on the planet right now in immediate terms is what's going on at Zaporizhzhia. So that's to inform you. We are pushing a petition to the UN to have a global intervention. Thank you, Dennis Bondar, if you're still with us, for your presentation. Thank you, Harry Hawkins, for bringing him on and for raising this issue. It's very important.
Dennis,
Okay.
Dennis is not here. David Brown is from Pennsylvania. We have David Brown from Pennsylvania that's still on our list and we committed to. So
Okay, we'll do that.
Dorothy.
We'll go through Justin and Lynn, and then we'll go to David Brown for the last couple minutes. Where are you from? Josh Fox is a Pennsylvania boy. Maybe you guys know each other. David Brown running for Congress there. Justin, Lynn, and then we'll go to David Brown, please.
What happened to me? I was supposed to be next.
Oh, Dorothy. Okay, go ahead, Dorothy, please.
Hi, Josh. So, I first heard about you through someone named Lance Simmons, who was here when you did Gaslight. He came to California to promote your movie. I don't know if you remember him. I guess you
literally talked to Lance Simmons this afternoon.
Yeah, I talked to him a lot because we're involved in politics together.
I don't talk to him a lot, but he called me this afternoon, talking, ranting and raving about the insanities of Robert Kennedy Jr. But we can talk.
Right? Yeah, that's another whole story. I want to beg you, and I beg everybody, do not use climate change. It's global warming. Climate change is a phrase that was concocted by Frank Luntz, the Republican messaging guy, because he felt that global warming sounded too scary and climate change sounded innocuous, which it does, because change can be good. And we have to break ourselves of the habit of using that phrase. It's a dangerous phrase. Please, I beg you, do not use it.
Okay.
I would probably,
since you got that, I use global weirding, which comes from Amory Lovins.
just not climate change. Change is a good thing.
And
So I was going to say that perhaps I have a friend named Ian Masters has a show called Background Briefing. It goes out to a hell of a lot of people, and they have, and a lot of them, some of them actually have money. So Russell, maybe you and I will introduce Josh to and get him on Ian's program. That would be great. Okay. And so, what is Rebekah Jones exactly doing right now?
Rebekah Jones was running for Congress up until November. She has been through the ringer for 3 years. She is currently trying to find a job, to be honest. Nobody.
So she's still married? She still has her children?
Moved to Maryland. She's just finally moved to Maryland to get out of Florida. Her family has suffered quite a bit of persecution. She's in the middle of a lawsuit, which I don't know much about because it's a civic suit and I can't know much about it. So she's trying to find work. She's, I think, trying to recuperate from 3 years of just total wall-to-wall insanity. She's, I think, right now, the most important thing for her is to resettle in Maryland, regroup a little bit, and then see if somebody will hire her. The thing that's so difficult about all of this, and you can ask any of these whistleblowers throughout history, is after you go and do this, it's very, very hard to get hired. It's very, very hard to find and as a young person, she's only like 33 years old or something like this. That so her husband is looking for a new job right now. She's looking for a new job. She's definitely helping us try to promote the film. Even though there are definitely moments where you might question her judgment in the film, even though it is not like just a lionizing only, she's a human being and she's allowed us to make an accurate and very interesting and intricate portrait of her, especially as she goes through a lot of hardship. But Daniel Ellsberg, right before he passed away, sung her praises. He said, listen, no one in our government, not even Anthony Fauci, laid all the documents in front of people and said, these policies are killing people. Rebekah did that. So, she's looking for work. Part of a great legacy of whistleblowers in this country who were trying really hard to get people not to die. When you look at the numbers when she actually spoke out in April of 2020 versus what they became, And Ron DeSantis and his Florida push right there was one of the most adamant ideological voices about not giving people money. I mean, look at what they did in New Zealand. They paid people to stay home. It's absurd to think that they could do that in New Zealand and not in the United States. We're the richest country in the world, right? It's absurd to think that they would give people assistance in Europe and not in the United States. Well, that's the culture war that we're talking about. So if anyone knows where she should go, yeah, exactly. Thank you for somebody put in the chat. Rebekah, on her own time, maintained an accurate COVID dashboard for a long time. She actually included schools in that dashboard, kids that Florida wasn't keeping track of. She was posting school COVID data for the whole nation. She did have assistance from Google. She did have she fundraised for it. But right now, you know, that money always runs out. And so she definitely needs employment. If people need a great data person, a scientist, a person who in climate change, a person who will speak her own mind, let me know.
It's too bad California's so expensive. She can't, she could probably find work here, but could she afford to live here? That's another story. Okay, so I'll tell Russell, send me all the information that I need. I'll send it to my list and I'll get it to Ian and I'll make a contribution, of course. Okay, and I'll say hi to Lance for you. Again.
If he's not
Well, Russell's not here, Dorothy, but we can get you connected.
I'll be in touch with him.
And Josh, very quickly before I go to Justin Lin, David Brown is a candidate for Congress in Pennsylvania. David, do you want to introduce yourself to Josh? Josh has a long history in Pennsylvania.
I'd be thrilled
Brown,
to.
where are you?
Well, very well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation, Josh. I'm thrilled to connect with you. I'm running in Pennsylvania's 166 state house district, which is currently held by an incumbent Democrat who actually chairs the House Environmental Resources and Energy Committee, and is a strong proponent of nuclear power as an alternative energy source. As the answer to the fossil fuels issue. Obviously, Pennsylvania, it's a big deal. We are the largest energy producer that doesn't impose a severance tax on fossil fuel extraction. My mother lives in the blast radius of the Mariner East pipeline. Josh, you may be familiar with that monstrosity. So it's a major issue. And fortunately, I live in a district that it's democratic, it's quite progressive, amenable to candidates who brand themselves that way. My issue is merely, and this will come as no surprise to you, name recognition, because I think I have about the most boring name on earth, and my opponent has been there since I was in preschool about 30 years ago. So that my platform largely centers the environment, workers' rights, trying to navigate that very difficult juxtaposition of Democrats who support labor, and of course I fall very, very wholeheartedly into that category. You might be able to tell by my background, I'm a musician. I'm a member of the Philadelphia Musicians Union, very distinct from the building trades, which tend to be, in spite of their good work around labor laws, a real issue when it comes to pressuring Democrats to take bad votes around the environment when it's believed that fracking is the only potential source of jobs. My other work is actually very, very, it centers the separation of church and state. That's my other life. I run a podcast called Unreasonable, and we talk about the nature of Christian nationalism in this country. I'm the chair of the Pennsylvania Secular Democrats, and our work is we're not an atheist support group exactly. We're an activism organization. We endorse and support candidates who are pro-science, who are pro-abortion rights, who are pro-democracy. I'd be happy, I know we don't have any time left, but I'm going to put my information in the chat, including information about Unreasonable, Secular Dems of PA, and my campaign, which formally begins after the November election, and I'd be thrilled to answer any questions.
Well, David, why don't you have Josh on your podcast?
Great, I would love to. Where's the district?
It is just, I should have mentioned, that's just west of Philadelphia. So I live in Haverford Township. It's all of Haverford Township and the northernmost part of Marple Township.
I know Haverford well. I've spoken there before.
Hey,
Where were you?
right.
I've spoken at the school.
All right,
It's
so
right across the street from my house.
Cool.
why don't you guys exchange contacts
Absolutely.
and have Josh on your podcast? And Josh, this is a guy in Pennsylvania, obviously, that you should be in touch with.
Well, I'm very, very grateful to meet you and to speak with all of you.
Easiest way to get in touch with me, just to hit me up on Instagram. It's at Josh Fox Film, and I can I respond to that quite a bit.
Okay, wonderful.
I think
Thank
I'm doing the messaging wrong on the chat, and I don't know how to fix it, but I'll learn.
Oh, there you are. David, I see your contacts here, David Brown for state rep. And God knows we need progressive state reps in Pennsylvania. Josh, do you still live in Pennsylvania? Where are you based?
Yeah, I do. I am based right in New York, Brooklyn, but I also am still very much in Pennsylvania. I have a house there that I'm at more than at least half the time. Our workspace is here in Brooklyn. You're seeing this is our rehearsal studios and film studios and whatnot. Yeah, I'm in Wayne County up in the northeast corner of PA, all the way up in the corner near the Delaware River. And yeah, PA, you know, Pennsylvania politicians even Democrats are often pro fracking. We've had a lot of lip service to fixing the issues with fracking in the state of Pennsylvania, and very, very, very little action. Governor Josh Shapiro, we were hoping, would be a bright light on this because he prosecuted the fracking industry with criminal offenses while he was Attorney General, and then he turned around and reopened the area in Dimmock and in Gasland to drilling, and now those people are completely screwed. So we have no real champions in government in PA. Summer Lee is terrific. She was an activist that I knew back in Western PA, but Doug Shields was terrific. So we do have a smattering of great people, you know, but the history of the Democrats in PA is still very much influenced by people like Ed Rendell, who were pro-fracking, who were completely corrupt, who were not with the progressive wing of the Democrats. So it's great to hear that you're running, and be happy to talk to you more.
Well, thank you. Be thrilled to connect. Believe it or not, we have a faction of our secular Democrats up there in Wayne County. So I know where you are, and there are some folks fighting the good fight up there.
Cool. Well, it's great to connect you guys. This is what we've been trying to do. And David, it's good to have you on, and I hope you get in to the Pennsylvania House. I want to mention, by the way, we have Rhonda Roth on the call. Josh, she is a very hardcore Florida energy activist and really great, some person you should know in the progress of your film. And I'm sure she knows a lot about Rebekah. Okay.
It's a wonderful thing to be on with you guys. I really appreciate just the feeling of community that I'm having right now. So
well, the feeling of community,
great to have.
It's great to have you. And we, after 2 full hours, we have 53 people still with us. So I want to call on Justin, Lynn, and Mary and David. Make sure that, well, we've got your contacts. You're welcome to chime in again. Okay, Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, 3 points: context, connection, and creativity. So context, California has been leading the nation in building solar and batteries. One of the things that IBEW has been a kind of a stick in the mud about, though, is they will not create a pipeline for people from changing over from being pipe fitters to being electrical transmission tower people. So that's how an issue for labor and moving climate catastrophe mitigation forward. Then connection, I'm wondering, Josh, if you have had much opportunity to connect with people around, you know, some of the pipelines going through like the Great Lakes, especially Michigan. And then the third thing is if you've also had any much to say in places about basically subsidies for the arts, movie making especially, kind of like the idea of democracy vouchers, where people can put money towards their favorite candidates. They can put money towards public filmmaking.
I love that idea. First of all, let me just say about pipelines. Our films.
Oh, you got muted, sir.
So my films, Gasland in 2010, Gasland Part 2 in 2013, How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change, which was on HBO and Sundance in 2016, Awake, A Dream from Standing Rock, The Truth Has Changed in 2020. Every one of those films has had a really extensive grassroots engagement tour. What does that mean? It means we say to the movement, who wants us to come? and help you with whatever fight you're in the middle of. And thankfully, we have foundation support usually to do that. So that means I can go to a frontline battle for free, show the film. The activists and organizers in that region can then organize and have an event. And some of those events are anywhere between 50 people to 5,000 people, right? And we've had quite a lot of these events, over 500 of these events. So 500 frontline battles all across the United States and in Europe. And we show up with the film or show up with the performance, and not to mention Solutions Grassroots, which is a whole nother thing. And we try to educate people about the issue that the activists are working on in that area. So lots and lots and lots of pipeline battles, right? When we were in Michigan, we definitely highlighted a few of those pipeline battles. We highlighted pipeline battles across the East Coast and in Florida and in California. So wherever we are summoned to go with the movie, we tend to show up, right? Because that's the whole program, right? Movies don't create change. Movies don't create actual political change. Movements create change. So our movies are there to support the movements. And so our work, and I take this very, very seriously, is about that organizing. And, you know, I've had Hollywood outfits like participant pictures. You know, I go in there, I tell them, I show all the stuff that we've done. And they say, Josh, you get all those people in a room. Oh my God, what do you tell them to do? I said, this is your problem in Hollywood. We don't tell them what to do. They tell us what to do. It's the frontline organizers who always know what they need, right? We're just there to be like the big show. We're the circus coming to town. So we're showing that film. We're educating people about our film, but it's the frontline activists that are supposed to be and what we want to be the beneficiaries of that, right? So with these three new films, The Welcome Table, The Edge of Nature, and the Rebekah Jones film, we will do the same thing. The Edge of Nature right now, which is a film about preserving nature, about climate change, about long COVID as well. That film we're going to be making into a performance where I'm doing the music and the narration live. We're going to be opening that in New York next year, but there are also a whole bunch of farms and frontline, you know, places that are looking for that right now. I did a performance of it in Amsterdam and in Mexico City, and we're putting that out on the road as soon as we can. The Welcome Table, we're going to be doing the same thing about conflict and about climate refugees. So for us, like that idea of getting to the front line, fighting those pipelines, fighting those battles, we're just there to aid the movement. So we'll show up for free. The movement and the organizers have to book the hall and they have to get the people, but then they can use that event in whatever they want, fundraising, matriculation into their organizations, drives for petitions, whatever it is. So that's our model of change. That's how we built the anti-fracking movement coast to coast and around the world. And so we're here to fight pipelines, and we're here to do that frontline organizing and have the media serve the movement. So that was the first question. Yeah. The second question about fundraising, you know, we're a theater company as well as a film company. So we've had grants from the NEA, we've had grants from the MAP Fund, we've had grants from the New York State Council for the Arts. We're always looking for more funding. We never have enough. We're not millionaires, certainly not. I wish we had gotten those types of deals. We decided to work with HBO, which pays us a lot less than if we were with movies in theaters, but has a huge, huge reach. Our agenda was always to change things, but it has always put us in a place where we're scrambling for money. So yes, by all means, I love those arts proposals.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Lynn, we're over time, but we'll go another 10 minutes with Josh. Lynn Feinerman and Mary Stonewall, and then Steve and Jeffrey Parker will have a question for you. Mike, if you want to sign off, I think Steve can carry us, but we'll give Josh the extra time. Go ahead, Lynn and Mary, and then Steve, you'll have the last word, and Jeffrey Barker will have a question for you. Go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, just wanted to give a sort of footnote by way of the day's news, which appeared on Democracy Now! Regarding climate change, global warming, frogs in a pot, heating up, whatever you want to call it. Today, Greg Abbott signed a bill in Texas saying that no matter how hot it gets in Texas, people have limited to no capacity to get a drink or take a rest when they are working outside in the heat. While that was being signed, the planned ice dome or ice bridge for the petrochemical companies in Texas was underway.
Well, it's unbelievable. Jeffrey Bartow wanted to raise the issue that Ron DeSantis is a product of both Yale and Harvard. I don't know what, and there's a map that's got us all terrified. We started with that a couple of hours ago, and here we are. And of course, fracking is right at the heart of that. David Brown, when you're in the Pennsylvania legislature, I hope you'll be able to do something about it. Mary, and then Steve. Mary Butler Stonewall, and then Steve Caruso to take us out. Oh my God. Look at that.
All right. Hey, this is for Josh.
Go ahead.
You work with a lot of the mainstream activists, but there's people like me out there that we're the only ones blowing the whistle in regards to, like, for me, it's inadequate building codes versus global warming, and pointing out the fact that the United States for 300 years has been building in tornado all over the United States. And they have not adjusted building codes to take into account the natural disaster environmental history of the region. And no building code is addressing that. Like in Egyptian time, if an engineer built a building and a natural weather phenomenon took that building down, the engineer was held liable. In today's society, we have a cookie cutter mentality of build up, board up, tear down, rebuild. And then we complain that Portland cement's run out of cement. Well, of course they are. We're rebuilding communities year after year. And then they're complaining that the woods aren't growing back fast enough for the demand of wood in America to rebuild. Why not? Because we are constantly wasting our natural resources. And nobody, they'll tell you that the cow's farts are causing carbon, and they'll tell you your car is causing carbon, but nobody's making the big argument that I'm making, which is the biggest one. When we have a natural disaster coming into effect, we have to put out carbon for the evacuation. So you have so many more cars on the road than you'd normally have escaping the town. Then you have the guys that are doing the sandbagging and the boarding up of the windows, everything, all that's carbon being put into the air. Then you have the rescue, all the heavy equipment, helicopters, planes, everything that's sent out, that carbon is put into the air. Then you have the tear down, and when we get rid of stuff, almost every disaster is from 7,000 cubic tons to over 70,000 cubic tons of waste that cannot be separated. It cannot be recycled. It gets buried or dumped at sea. Nobody's talking about this end of what is causing global warming. And, they say carbon emissions are the highest recorded in history, and they're trying to blame it on cows and this and that. And yeah, coal industry, yes. Cars, yes. But the number one contributor is due to the fact that building codes does not mandate better standards for the environment with which a structure is put in. And the United States did, here's the neat thing in history, the United States did address it in the 1700s. And it was argued, the circle out inside the box, that we'd lose square footage in taxes. So they did not amend the law. They said that once we had enough people in the United States, that they would change building codes, and never did.
Okay, thank you,
Well,
Mary.
I mean, all of these things are related to the climate, right? We know that all of our buildings, all of our roads, all of our everything is based on knowing where water goes, how much water, knowing where moisture is, how much moisture, knowing, how hot it is, how cold it's going to be, when is it going to freeze. All of the things that we have created in this world are based on the Holocene, on a stable climatic regime that no longer exists. We are currently in what's called the Anthropocene, the human era of climate. Some call it the Pyrocene, the era, the age of fire. We're certainly in that today in New York. We have more smoke from the wildfires again in Canada. So every single thing that we've ever built has to be reevaluated for a different planet. The planet that we're on now is not the planet that created building standards and building codes, years ago. So when we see things collapse, and we don't say climate is a factor, that's a problem.
Wow, thank you, Josh. David Brown, before we turn over to Steve, Jeffrey Barkdale wants to connect with you, Josh, as do many others. I'm sure if you'll put your links in the chat, that would be great. David Brown, did you want to comment before we roll on out?
Well, sure. As Josh and I evidently both come from a state where this argument is so where this issue is so central to state policy. Pennsylvania is responsible for 1% of all global carbon emissions. So, this is an issue where, it became issue number one on my campaign because it's now even among Republicans, of whom there are not too many in my district, that climate change, global warming it's becoming less controversial. And it's my aspiration that a faction of us, Summerlee, who's now in Congress, of course, is a great example of somebody who led on this issue in the state legislature, can start to steer the Democratic Party in a better direction toward accepting that there does not have to be this false dichotomy between labor and the environment. And in fact, I think I saw someone in the comments mention something about pipe fitters, perhaps, and job transitioning. Now, of course, when somebody like me, a professional organizer with violinist's hands, comes to a Central Labor Council meeting and starts talking about job retraining, it sounds hopelessly condescending and ill-informed, which is exactly why I believe that labor leaders need to be part of these discussions, because these are folks whose energies and influence could be used for good in our endeavor for mitigating the climate crisis. It's not being discussed, at least broadly within the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. I'm hoping that we can invigorate more of that discussion. Again, Josh, I'm thrilled about the work that you're doing. I do hope we can connect. Pennsylvania is it's in trouble, but it's got a lot of opportunity right now. Democrats did just retake the House for the first time in 12 years or so. We do have a divided bicameral legislature, but with Shapiro, who is not always great, as it's been observed on the fracking issue, we've seen just in the past couple of weeks that his administration will apply to pressure. He was just approving $100 million to school voucher programs, siding with the Senate GOP. And between the teachers union and his constituents, we made a lot of noise about it, and he pledged to line veto the $100 million. So I'm optimistic. I see potential in our state, and I truly, tonight's meeting has been an eye-opener for me to learn of your community, about your issues, to understand the nuclear issue better. Frankly, I hope it will inform my own policy, if I'm so fortunate to be elected next year. So I'll be back, and I hope that you'll all be comfortable reaching out to me. I'll put my information in the chat one more time just so you can reach me. All of these email addresses, by the way, go to me. But I'd be thrilled to continue the discourse.
Thank you, David. I did put your links in the chat. I did, Howie Hawkins, I had a request in the chat for the link to the petition to the UN to send in the peacekeepers at Zaporizhia. If you'd put that in the chat, once again, it came from David Hartsough, who's a great activist for many, many decades. I do want to point out, when you're talking to labor about energy issues, that in California, and of course this is true at Limerick and the other nuclear plants in Pennsylvania, in California there are 1,500 workers at the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, and there are 70,000 people working in solar energy in California alone. And the 70,000 people who are working in solar energy in California is a bigger number than the entire workforce digging coal in the United States. So, the labor issue with renewables is clear as a bell. And that is where the jobs are, in Pennsylvania, in California, anywhere. As I'm sure Josh can tell you from his experiences with fracking.
Well, it's
So-
very difficult to breach this subject as a candidate. Last year I ran and lost. I earned the highest percentage of any challenger to this candidate in history, but I was just the winner of the losers in that regard. So I got work to do, but I made an attempt to earn the support of my county's Central Labor Council. They abhor my opponent because he won't even pick up the phone when they call. He doesn't have any interest in talking to them. But I gave my stump speech, and the very first question that came out of, I forget which trade, which leader asked me this question, but right away, okay, tell me your position on natural gas. And I had their attorney, I was honest with them, and about a half hour later, their attorney called me to say, you know, you just kissed $50,000 goodbye. What you should have said is, I'm here to make pipelines safe. Just like X, Y, or Z other Democratic candidates said. So
somebody's got to make the issue that renewable energy is the job source.
You should have.
Is the job source. There are
You
more
should have
people
charged him
working
with.
there are more people working in renewables in this country than nuclear by far, than coal by far, and even than oil. There's still equivalent numbers in gas, but that, you know, somebody's got to make that breakthrough, and maybe someday the renewable energy industry will get some brains and start supporting candidates like you.
I didn't know bribes were legalized. That guy can't say that and get away with it. He should be arrested. Come on. Seriously. I mean, you know, did you have him on recording? He offered me $50,000 because I said a certain thing. He's trying to bribe a politician. He should be charged, right?
Well,
this is crazy. Well, one other thing that David's into that's really important is the separation of church and state. And I just want to put that out there. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, and actually one little thing I would add to that is I could not have envisioned the separation issue as it pertained to the environment when I first breached this, when I first got into this work. I mean, I'm a lifelong secular person and a professional organizer, but the juxtaposition thereof, you know, where church-state separation meets activism, and where the issues, how deep the issues run, was pretty stunning to me to learn. And I will just say on climate change, there are large factions of influential activists, religious leaders, apostles within the New Apostolic Reformation who see this planet as a mere stepping stone to something else. Therefore, why do we have a responsibility to be stewards of this temporary, this placeholder, this purgatory? That's the wrong term, of course, but this is, you know, our mere, I don't know, 60 to 80, 70 to 90 years alive on this planet is nothing compared to eternity. Why do we have to take care of this planet? And then it becomes especially harrowing when you realize that this is a ubiquitous thought among the religious right, ubiquitous philosophy, and all of a sudden the separation issue becomes paramount to the environment issue.
Well, just remember, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Never forget that. Josh Fox, you've got your hand up. Josh?
I just wanted to say that, you know, in 2011, I was co-founder of an organization called the Solutions Project, which some of you may know. I don't support their work right now. They kicked me off the board 5 years ago because I was interested in doing grassroots work and they wanted to move in a very celebrity-oriented direction. However, what I wanted to say was that Mark Jacobson, the great scientist at Stanford University, has said over and over and over and over again that we do not need nuclear power. We have the wind, water, and sun. That's more than adequate to create all of our, to create all the energy for all of what we need. In fact, Lester Brown told me in 2010 that just 3 states, the wind energy in just 3 states, North Dakota, Kansas, and Texas, could power everything in the United States, including our 300 million cars, if they were all electric cars. So we don't need nuclear. That's a false argument. That is not true. Obviously the benefits are I mean the detriment is outweighs the benefits there. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that is absolutely not true. And you know, there's so many jobs to be made from something called the Green New Deal, right? Not only is the Green New Deal going to give us jobs, it will lessen healthcare costs by hundreds of billions of dollars. And all that information is still available at the Solutions Project website, or if you look up Mark Jacobson's work. Additionally, you know, the Green New Deal will pay for itself simply by creating energy, right? That then we use. And also we can stop guarding things like oil pipelines and oil ships. We spend something like $2 or $3 trillion in this country every single year, simply guarding the fleet of fossil fuel tankers.
Right, and we are way over time, but I'm game, Steve, if you are, if you're not falling asleep, or Wendy, to keep the conversation going and keep running the Zoom. Josh, it's up to you. You can stay, and David, you can stay as long as you want. I cannot resist pointing out, and this is I just published a piece of Counterpunch attacking Oliver Stone, which was hard to do because of his great career, but there you go.
It was a brilliant piece, Harvey.
Oh, thank you, Mara. Thank you for that. And by the way, if you want to reach Josh, get him an Instagram. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah, that's probably the best way. On Instagram, my Instagram is at Josh Fox Film.
Okay.
And I do answer it. And it's easy to.
All right, I want to point out, I'm sorry to jump in. I want to point out very quickly, because the nuclear issue came up again, Josh, and you're out there a lot. Even if all the people who oppose nuclear power came in and supported it, God forbid, they cannot build any more nuclear plants in this country physically for the next 5 years. Because this is a minor detail that nobody's dealing with. And David, you should know this as a candidate. There are 0 of the old big light water reactors under construction because of the disaster at Vogtle, where they ran up to $35 billion in Georgia, and at VC Summer in South Carolina, where they started to build, they spent $10 billion and they stopped. There are 0 large atomic reactors under construction in the United States. It's just a simple reality. And the only other thing they got is these small reactors that they're pushing. But the industry itself, in the small reactor industry, there's only one licensed maker called NuScale, predicts that their first usable plant won't be ready until December 2029. So between 2023, today, and 2029, at a minimum, there are 0 new reactors that can be built in this country. So when they are advocating nuclear power, they're advocating nothing. There's no there. And no matter what they want to say about how safe and reliable and cheap and waste storage and all that crap, they cannot build any new nuclear plants in the United States for the next 6 years. It's not doable. If you're advocating money going to nuclear power, you're advocating 0 new capacity for the next 6 years. That's the reality. So I just thought I'd throw that out to you. A small detail in the nuclear debate. Wendy, you were next, and Nyla.
You know what? I'm going to have to run. I wonder if I could just ask my question and leave. I apologize. Josh, I was so happy that you brought up Mark Jacobson's book, Mark Jacobson's work. His book is called No Miracles Needed: How Today's Technology Can Save Our Climate and Clean Our Air. And David, I highly recommend that you read that book, because it has a lot of information that you can use in your campaign. And I put the link in the chat. And I was going to ask about nuclear power, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. And I'm really happy to hear your position on it, Josh. And I wonder if I could just ask you whether you encounter people in the climate movement who are pro-nuclear, and if you engage with them at all and try to educate them about the errors of their ways, because there's so many climate leaders who seem to be taking the position of promoting nuclear power and claiming that we need it in order to avert this climate catastrophe that we're in the midst of right now.
Well, thank you. I mean, I love to interact with people in all ways. Usually my interactions are with audiences, not necessarily like in some kind of like global forum on what we should do. I do often just refer people to Mark Jacobson's work and to say, you know, this is a genius from Stanford who's mapped it all out and who says we don't need it. You know what I mean? There are people who make the argument that we cannot ramp up fast enough. But as Arvid just said, they're not building any new nuclear till 2029, right? Like there's no issue with speed with respect to nuclear, right? Nuclear power plants, I always say, you know, the liabilities are far more problematic. You cannot build it for every contingency. You simply can't, and make it still affordable and efficient. You know, we've seen what happened in Fukushima. We know what happened in Chernobyl, you know, and the point about construction from earlier is well taken, right? Like you can't build stuff now that you can't rely on. And there's no way to know what we can rely on if we don't know what the climate is going to do, right? What I'm terrified of is sea level rise and extreme weather with respect to not just nuclear, but also all of the Superfund sites that ring our coasts, right? We have huge amounts of toxic material everywhere. It's ubiquitous, it's all over the place, and it is, you know, supposed to stay away from human beings. It's not going to when we know that the climate disaster is striking all the time. You know, so I believe that if we had the political will, we could ramp up renewable energy, and that I believe that we need to keep putting the pressure on for the Green New Deal. I think that's so important. I think we need to keep putting the pressure on for the wind and for the sun. If you bundle wind, and the Mark Jacobson report in brief is very simple. When the wind is not blowing, the sun is often shining, because wind energy is a consequence of solar energy. So when the sun goes down, the wind blows harder, right? Which is what happens at night. So if you bundle those two together and you look at the arc of when wind is going and when sun is going, you actually combine the two, you get to 90% of all the generation of power that we need, right? And if you store it, if you have batteries to store, that's another option. There's wind power, there's tidal power and wave power, there's geothermal energy. There's all sorts of ways to fill in that other 10% of the gaps, including consuming less and placing certain restrictions on the use of energy, which of course is what we did during COVID, which gave us all a chance to do things like puzzles, read a book, and you know, things that were very actually fun. Take a walk in nature, ride your bicycle, things that we don't do when we're constantly consuming energy because we're plugged into 1,000 devices at the same time. So anyway, I just really appreciate what you guys are all doing, and I do have to run. I am a little late for.
Hold up, wait, Josh. There's something I need to tell you.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, no.
Jeff, I want to remind you again, David and Josh, both of you, although Josh is doing it longer, never concede the jobs issue. The jobs are in renewable energy, and there is no future of any jobs in the nuclear industry. Fracking's days are limited. Oil does not produce electricity, and coal has been dwarfed by the solar industry. There's 50,000 people in this country in the coal industry, and at least 250 just in solar alone. So that for a young politician, David, that's the breakthrough. And never forget, there's no argument for nuclear because they, as I say, they're not building any more nuclear plants, nor can they.
And often that's the argument for a transition. You know, that nuclear power is the you know, that's the magic
transition to poisonous death by radiation. That's about it for the whole planet.
This is the one chance I get in my life to argue for a free market economy. If we had an actual free market economy in energy, it would be over, and renewables would totally take over. And you got to remember that the nuclear plants that are operating are not insured. You can't drive your car without insurance, but they're operating 94 reactors, and none of them in Pennsylvania have insurance. If they blow up, you're screwed. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. I have Wendy and Howie. I know Josh, if you can just stay for Wendy and Howie, we'll wrap it up and that will be great. And Jeffrey, if you can keep your comments to 15 seconds, that will be great. Okay.
Thank you so much. I definitely don't want to keep you from being late. But I'm wondering, Josh, are you connected with Steven Donziger at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love
Okay.
Steven. I actually have done I did a few events in support of him, gave some speeches when he was incarcerated in his own Upper West Side apartment. And I believe he's doing a tour with Chris Smalls that I'm going to this week. And I think they're in New York this week.
And Dorothy is doing a fundraiser with him in September. So
yeah, he's a friend of our show. I thought that maybe yeah, I figured you guys could definitely support each other. The point I wanted to make really quick, and I thought of that. So I'm glad that you guys are connected. You brought up the Democratic Party not getting behind Rebekah, and so this is kind of for you and for David. They did the same thing. My friend ran for the state progressive caucus, or she was the progressive caucus chair, and she stepped down in protest of the Democratic chair and then ran for that party, and the Dems sent in Nikki Fried to undermine her. And this is going to happen everywhere. The Dems are kind of, okay, they're not extreme fascists that are burning down Nazis, but they kind of support them and fund them in some ways. And they're kind of just like the bus with the wheels falling off for climate. And we really need to be supporting progressive candidates and even people that are within the Democratic Party running as progressives, but we can't count on the Democratic Party in any way to not undermine progressive efforts that are really actually gonna go against the big oil and the pharmaceutical companies and the weapons manufacturers. And so there's some I don't want to say third party candidates right now, but either way, just need to be supporting and running and not counting on the Dems and doing whatever we can as progressives and get all the local progressive caucuses together. I know RFK is really not popular because he's getting a lot of really bad press, but I think he's definitely worth listening to if you're listening. Hey, Dorothy, come on. Dorothy, please don't do this to me, okay?
All right, well, Wendy, we're at the end here. So
yeah, I just wanted to let you know that the Dems aren't going to support anything that true progressives are going to do. Thanks.
Well, if David Brown becomes one of them, hopefully.
Anyway,
Howie, Howie Hawkins had his hand up.
What about? I wanted to talk about my Donziger while Jeff is still on the phone. Is Josh? Is Josh still there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Josh, we're doing an event with Steven Donziger at my house on September 9th. If you're going to be in California by any chance, we would love to have you drop by.
I won't be in California, but I'm going to see Steven, I think, on Wednesday night.
Well, tell him Dorothy said hi.
Josh, if you're going to see him in New York, let me know. I can come over and join you. I'm in Teaneck, weirdly enough. Okay.
Oh, nice. Well, if you go on Donziger's Instagram page, there is information about he's doing a tour with Chris Smalls. And I believe I just had it up. Where did it go?
It's Amazon. Amazon Union.
And New York City, July 19th.
Okay.
And Chris Smalls. So look for that.
Howie Hawkins. Go ahead, Howie.
Yeah, a few comments on climate policy and the Green New Deal. Harvey, the market won't work because the utilities will use their gas-fired plants or nuclear plants till they're worn out before they will switch to renewables. That's why we need public power. We need an eco-socialist Green New Deal. What we got from the Democrats who took that from the Greens is they dropped the ban on fracking and new fossil fuel infrastructure. They dropped the phase out of nuclear power. They dropped the cuts in the military budget to help pay for the whole thing. It's got to be done through the public sector also to coordinate between public transportation, the public green housing we need to build, and the, take the steel industry. You got to replace coke ovens. They won't do it until they wear out. Replace it with electric arc furnaces and green hydrogen. So that's why it needs to be done through the public sector and coordinated planning. What we got now are just incentives for consumers and corporations to build some renewables. It's hit or miss. It's all based on the bottom line for these corporations. So I'm saying, Josh is right. The Green New Deal can pay for itself, but only if we do it through the public sector. So the revenues that come in come back to us.
Okay,
I
very
gotta
good.
say, I agree 100%. I think, I don't know if you see my t-shirt, if it's backward, it says, we told you so, we told you so, we told you socialism. The idea here that the Green New Deal could be done through capitalism and through consumer practices is not possible. And I also know that, I mean, it's not that it's not possible. It's just that it will not get us there in time. This needs to be a massive government program, like other massive government programs, whatever ideology that is, to ever get there. That's got to be what's happening. We went on tour in 2014 to support this idea of grassroots renewable energy. We worked with renewable energy companies. We left 6-person renewable energy teams in every single state, town that we visited, 40 cities in New York and in Pennsylvania. Every place that we went, they suffered consumer paralysis. They didn't know if they were going to do rooftop solar, or if they're going to do a community energy, or if they were going to go for a escrow or rec credits. You know, when you leave this in the hands of consumers and you leave it in the hands of all this incredibly confusing competition, you're going to get there a lot slower. That's why I believe in the Green New Deal. I don't think Bernie Sanders' deal took all those things out. I was in support of his Green New Deal, but certainly what's happening with Joe Biden right now is all these incentives, all these things that are within that framework. You know, it's something, but is it what we need? You know, it's a baby step in the right direction. But you know, we need an FDR-like mobilization on renewable energy that pushes as hard as we possibly can, because we are in deep trouble. And we also need climate mitigation, because we're not going to have no climate impacts. Even if we were to turn off all the fossil fuels right now and replace it with renewable energy, we are still in for quite a lot of really hard times. And that we'll leave that for another day.
Well, can hemp be the transition fuel for diesel, and plus all the carbon sequestration it'll do in the meanwhile is negative? Hemp. Oh.
Josh,
I love you guys. I gotta go. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Please do.
Thank you.
Can I at least say one person's name
Yes,
for you to look
please.
up? Hisashi Uichi. Look that person up for both of you, David Brown and Josh Fox. For Josh Fox, you can probably use him to make a documentary about why we should steer away from radiation, and for you should probably use him in a political speech about why we should steer away from radiation too.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeffrey. And we'll leave you with the last word, Josh, from Steve Caruso, which is hemp.
I don't need the last word. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody.
Hey, it's been great having you, and
see you
we
soon.
still have
Thank you.
35 people on the phone.
Thank you.
Go ahead. We'll see you. Stay high to Steve Donziger on Wednesday. Wendy, thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. Dorothy, everybody, Jeffrey, and Steve, thanks for keeping us going. It's only been 2 hours and 45 minutes.
That's all.
That's all. We still have 34 people with us.
And we're not nuclear powered. Thank you.
Next week, your assignment is to try and see the Oppenheimer movie, and we will have a great session. And David Brown, good luck. I'm glad we got you in, and glad you met Josh, and good luck on your campaign. We expect you, we give you about 20 years to be governor, okay?
Thank you for running.
From your lips to somebody's ears. Thank you all so much for having me. Let's stay in touch. I learned a lot. I want to keep learning from you.
Well, you can spread the link on this chat, and you can join us anytime. Rhonda Roth, good to see you again. It's been many years. And everybody, no nukes. And
Harvey, are we supposed to mention about the speech?
Let's get those. No, not today, Jeffrey. It's gone on too long. But thank you. Let's get those peacekeepers to Zaporizhia, for God's sakes. We really need that, probably more than anything in the short term. Okay. Again, we'll see you all next week. And this couldn't have been better. Thank you again, Wendy. Thank you, Tatanka, Paul, all you guys. Wonderful. Dorothy, Dr. Nancy, always great to see you. Howie, thank you for pointing out the error of my ways on the pre-market. The problem is that I actually met Milton Friedman once, and I thought he was really cute. He was the shortest person I ever met. And I like to think that he would help us with. I think he's even shorter than Robert Reich, but I really about that.
Wow.
So I always envision Milton Friedman helping us with renewables, but maybe it's a myth. I don't know. And my only reason, by the way, I want to thank you. You ran a great meeting yesterday for Pacifica Radio, and we'll keep you posted on all that. All right.
Be ready for a call from me, Harvey.
Okay.
No nukes.
No nukes, everybody.
No
Peace
nuke.
out. Peace
No
out.
nukes.
See you
Thanks,
next
everyone.
week.
Later.
David, come
Thanks,
back
David.
anytime.
Happy Shark Month.